the mental transmitter of Marvel. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 26 Return to England. Back on the streets of London, Alex's excitement had subsided. He glanced around, then set his sights on the RAF airfield. Alex was unfamiliar with London, having come and gone so quickly he barely recognized any of it. The only familiar spot he had was the RAF airfield where his plane had landed. Within a few steps, Alex was near the airfield. Two British soldiers approached him, their faces wary. "This is a military area. No trespassing." "Hello, I'm Alex Zhang." Before Alex could finish his words, the two British soldiers raised their guns, pointed their muzzles at him, and shouted sternly, "Leave immediately, or you will be killed." Alex stared at the two British soldiers, furious but helpless. He raised his hands and slowly backed away. Okay, I'm leaving. I'm leaving." After retreating a dozen steps, the two British soldiers finally lowered their guns, but they didn't let their guard down. Their faces remained wary as they looked at Alex. After retreating about 100 meters, Alex turned around, glanced around, and walked aimlessly in one direction, his mind churning. Should I go find Churchill? Or the British royal family? Soon, Alex entered the city of London. The heavy dampness fell on his body, soon condensing into droplets on his leather jacket, then sliding to the ground, splashing water everywhere. As he walked, a newsboy suddenly ran by, clutching a stack of newspapers and shouting as he ran, "The greatest escape group in history has landed in London today, and Churchill is personally welcoming them at London Harbour." Alex was startled for a moment, then realized that this greatest escape group in history must be Audrey and her group. But why did they arrive in London only now? Filled with confusion, Alex followed the crowd toward London Harbour. In the distance, Alex could see more than a dozen large ships docked in the Thames, their sides crowded with people. The docks were even more crowded, and hundreds of police officers were struggling to maintain order. Alex's sharp eyes quickly spotted Neil Grant at the bow of the first ship. Dressed in his Finnish military uniform, Neil looked remarkably dashing. Alex chuckled softly and teleported to Neil, who was waving to the crowd on the shore. "Hi, Neil, long time no see." Neil Grant was startled, staring at Alex suddenly appearing before him, seemingly unable to believe his eyes. After a moment's pause, he exclaimed with surprise, "Alex, you're still alive." After saying it in Finnish, Neil repeated it in broken English. "It's not that easy to kill me," Alex chuckled, a look of surprise on his face. "Oh, you learned English too? I'll have to learn some English when I fight alongside the Allies." Neil's English, with its characteristic Nordic lilt, sounded quite unique. Alex nodded, then turned and looked around, asking in surprise, "Where's Toby? Why can't I see him?" Neil's face froze, and he asked cautiously, "You don't know?" Neil had assumed Alex's survival was due to Toby, but now it seemed otherwise. Alex frowned, puzzled. "Know what?" Neil sighed and recounted his story on the Pats River. Finally, looking at Alex with a look of guilt, he said, "Alex, I'm sorry. For the lives of 70,000 people, I'd rather you did that." Alex shook his head, indicating his indifference. Then, with a bitter smile, he said, "It only implicated Toby and the others." Toby and the others were at the hands of Hydra, facing certain death. As the two sighed, Audrey suddenly ran out of the cabin, her face filled with anxiety. Seeing Alex standing at the bow, Audrey slowed her pace, then sped up and rushed over, throwing herself into Alex's arms. "Brother, you're finally back." Alex stroked Audrey's hair and turned to look at Neil. "I lied to her, saying you were out running errands and would be back soon," Neil explained quietly, his face pained. "She's been asking me this question multiple times a day these days. It's giving me a headache." Alex nodded slightly and smiled in thanks. "Thank you, Neil." While comforting Audrey, Alex looked at Neil and asked curiously, "By the way, why are you only arriving in London now?" Neil shook his head, somewhat helplessly saying, "The US has blocked the North Sea, so we circled back via the Atlantic." A moment later, the boat docked. Neil went down first, followed by Alex, holding Audrey's hand. The rest of the boat's crew soon emerged. Neil Grant of the Finnish Defence Force, greeting the Prime Minister. Neil Grant stood erect and saluted in a resonant voice. Churchill, clad in a thick woolen trench coat and slightly stooped, straightened his body, returned the salute, and declared confidently, "The Allies welcome your joining. We will drive out the enemy, without fail." Turning to look behind Neil, Churchill asked, somewhat puzzled, "May I ask who is Alex?" Alex stood behind Neil, carefully observing the great figure of history. He was a simple old man, yet his energy and spirit radiated a powerful strength, especially his inherent confidence, which always brought peace to people. Upon hearing Churchill's words, Alex stepped forward with a humble smile. "Alex, meet Mr. Churchill." Churchill had clearly not expected that the man who had accomplished this great escape would be a young man in his 20s. After a moment's pause, Churchill finally recovered his composure, grasping Alex's hand tightly. With a hearty laugh, he exclaimed, "With such a young hero, we can surely defeat the enemy, Mr. Churchill, you are so kind." After a simple yet grand welcome, Alex was invited to Churchill's residence for dinner, a meal that would remain unforgettable for Alex. When Alex returned to Churchill's specially arranged apartment, Audrey eagerly surrounded him, curiously asking, "Was dinner at Churchill's residence good?" Alex, looking disconsolate, complained dramatically, "I swear, I'll never eat British food again. It's awful." "I think it's just okay." Audrey looked up, a bit surprised. "When we get back to New York, I'll treat you to some real food." After their British dinner, Alex even immediately longed to return to Chinatown. Compared to Uncle An's cooking, British food was utter crap. "Alex, come try on some clothes. I made them especially for you." As they were talking, Ella emerged from a side room, carrying a suit. "Tomorrow's the day of the award ceremony, so you need to look your best." Alex obediently changed into his suit, stretched his arms and legs, and turned around. He said with satisfaction, "It fits perfectly." "Thank you, Mom." Audrey, who had just disappeared for a moment, returned with a bow tie in her hand. "Brother, put this on." Alex put on the bow tie, looked at himself in the mirror, and said narcissistically, "Audrey, don't you think I'm handsome?" Audrey, incredibly flattering, looked up with admiration and said, "I'm the most handsome." After the awards ceremony, Alex declined invitations to a banquet with the British royal family and other dignitaries. He fled England with Audrey and Ella, boarding a ship bound for New York. Germany was bombing Britain relentlessly, and flying was a death sentence. Alex had no choice but to take the ship, which offered relative safety. Chapter 27 American Trivia. When Alex returned to the United States, a love affair swept across the country, bringing countless people to tears. It was even more touching and heartbreaking than this summer's Blue Bridge romance. "Ghost, what is this?" As she stepped off the ship, Audrey spotted a huge poster on the dock. It showed a man and a woman embracing. The ethereal image was blurry, but she could vaguely make out the woman was Vivien Leigh. "Is that Vivien Leigh's new movie?" Alex looked over, surprised. "Ghost is already in theaters." "Yeah, you're going to miss this if you don't come back." Just as she was surprised, someone rushed over and hugged Alex tightly, their face brimming with emotion. Alex looked at Bucky's pursed lips and teased, "Hey, Bucky, you've gotten stronger." Turning to the side, he saw Steve standing there with a faint smile on his face. Alex put his arm around Steve's shoulders and complained, "Steve, you need to eat more. You're really too skinny." Then, another crisp female voice rang out, slightly breathless but filled with excitement. "Brother." Alex let go of Steve and Bucky and turned to look at Marilyn Monroe, standing there in a pink princess dress, her bright eyes filled with tears. "Monroe, I missed you so much." Alex picked up Monroe and kissed her bright forehead. Monroe's pretty face flushed slightly, and she hugged Alex's head and burst into tears, crying at the top of her lungs, "Brother, please don't leave me again, ever." Alex was busy trying to comfort Monroe, while Audrey's face tensed and she was secretly angry. Behind her, Ella's face also changed. She realized that Alex didn't seem as nice as she had imagined. Just then, another female voice rang out. A graceful woman wearing a veil walked over, her voice tinged with anger. "My hero, you finally came back." Alex turned his head, puzzled, wondering who this woman was and why she was so angry at him so quickly. "Vivien." Steve noticed the confusion on Alex's face and whispered, "She was also very worried when you disappeared." Alex gave an awkward smile and waved his hand. "Let's go to Chinatown. I'll treat everyone to a nice meal as an apology." "How's that?" Amidst cheers from the crowd, the group boarded a car and headed for Chinatown. After a hearty meal, everyone expressed their forgiveness. Hearing this, Alex smiled bitterly. He was only worth a meal. After the meal, Alex found Vivien, followed by Audrey Hepburn and, of course, Marilyn Monroe. The bond between these little girls was truly strange. After just a few hours together, they became close friends, holding hands wherever they went. "Miss Vivian, how has Marilyn been doing lately?" Alex glanced at Marilyn, then turned to Vivian. "Just call me Pussy." Vivian Lee reached out and touched Monroe's little head, chuckled and said, "Monroe is very good. She has appeared in movies, and the director praised her beauty." Monroe raised her head with a smug look on her face, like a proud swan, waiting for Alex's praise. Alex gently touched Monroe's head, smiled slightly, looked at Vivian Lee with gratitude and said, "Then I have to thank Vivian Pussy for your good teaching, and thank you for Pussy's care for Monroe during this period." Vivian Lee smiled lightly, radiating the radiance of motherhood. "This is what I should do. After all, I am Monroe's godmother." Alex smiled and pulled Audrey forward a little. Looking at Vivian Lee, he said embarrassedly, "Pussy, I have something else to trouble you." Alex pointed at Audrey and said, "This is my sister. She also likes movies. I hope you have quite a few sisters." Vivian Lee rolled her eyes at Alex, and pulled Audrey to her side. She looked her up and down and praised her, beautiful and elegant. "A good seedling for making movies, so, you agree?" Alex was very excited. With the development of the war, Alex would have to leave the United States. Alex would feel more at ease after handing Audrey over to Vivian Lee. Vivian Lee snorted and said in a strange tone, "What good does it do me to help you raise your two sisters?" "Benefits." Alex pondered for a moment, then looked up at Vivian Lee and said, "I'll tell you a few more stories, and I guarantee you'll be a Hollywood star." Vivian Lee stared at Alex intently, and after a long silence, she said, "I don't like acting, and I don't want to be a star." "Forget it. Why am I telling you all this?" Vivian Lee wiped her eyes with a hand and laughed dryly. "I'll help you raise your two sisters." Alex glanced at Vivian Lee strangely, but didn't ask any further questions. Everyone has their secrets. That night, Alex returned to his apartment and, taking advantage of the quiet night, quietly used teleportation to return to his original laboratory. But to Alex's disappointment, the laboratory seemed abandoned, its equipment emptied out, leaving nothing behind. Pushing open the door, the narrow corridor was pitch black, and there were no guards. Walking down the hallway, Alex found himself in Berlin. He searched the city for the Red Skull and Zora, but there was no sign of them, not to mention the legendary Hydra. There was no news of Toby Mans, his life or death unknown. Unable to find any information, Alex reluctantly returned to the United States. While preparing a good story for Vivian Lee, he also busied himself with finding accommodations for Audrey and Ella. Unlike Monroe, who lived alone with Vivian Lee, Audrey had no problem staying with her, but Audrey had a mother, and even if she lived with Vivian Lee, she would still need to find a place for her mother. 2 days had already passed since Alex returned to New York. He had already given Vivian Lee his story and found a place for Audrey and her mother, Ella, just 100 meters from her home. During that time, Alex accompanied the women to see Ghost. They all burst into tears, keeping Alex busy, trying to console one and comfort the next. The dust had finally settled and Alex was just about to take a good rest, but he never expected that trouble would arise again and a storm would suddenly arrive. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 28 Recruit Training. When Alex ran into Steve again, he found him clutching a medical form. His thin face was filled with excitement, his eyes filled with disbelief. Seeing Steve's expression, Alex knew it was a done deal. Sure enough, as Alex approached, Steve grabbed Alex, his grip so tight it hurt slightly. "Alex, I did it. I'm a soldier now," Alex chuckled softly, holding down the excited Steve. "That's great. We can fight side by side." Bucky was skeptical when he heard the news, but only smiled when he saw the medical form in Steve's hand. Without saying anything, he put one arm around Steve's shoulders and the other around Alex, hugging him tightly. Without a few days' rest, the three of them were drafted out of Brooklyn and headed to a boot camp in New Jersey. There, they would undergo 3 months of training before being deployed to the battlefields of World War II, where they would fight for their lives. Before joining the army, Alex and the other two had already undergone more than 6 months of physical training, and their physical fitness had improved significantly. Steve, though not quite as good, was almost as good as a normal person. During the basic training for new recruits, Alex and Bucky took the lead and were ahead of the other recruits, while Steve was able to keep up with the majority, not being the last one in the group as in the movies. After the basic training, the new recruits were assigned to various regiments to receive professional physical fitness and military skills training. Alex and Bucky were assigned to the Army's Ace 107th Infantry Regiment for their outstanding performance. Steve's performance was average, so he was assigned to another regiment. After a day of training, Alex dragged Bucky to find Steve. Steve had a strong sense of justice, but he didn't have the corresponding strength. Alex was really worried that he would be bullied in the barracks. "Alex, is this really your first day holding a gun?" Bucky exclaimed in amazement as they walked arm in arm with Alex towards Steve's regiment. "Did you see that? 10 rings every time." The instructor was stunned. Alex shrugged and said casually, "Do you think I've ever had the chance to handle a gun before?" With his powerful telekinesis, Alex could easily lock onto the bullseye of a target. The rest was simple: aim, shoot, and hit the bullseye. Bucky was about to say something else when a violent voice rang out from the nearby playground. "Steve, go home and draw your comics. This isn't the place for you." Alex and Bucky exchanged a glance, their eyes blazing. They took off and ran towards the playground. On the playground, Steve lay groggily on the ground, his smallest uniform looking baggy. The helmet strapped to his forehead nearly covered half of Steve's head. "Steve, are you okay?" Seeing Steve's miserable state, Alex's anger flared up. He quickly ran over to help Steve up, glaring angrily at the giggling soldiers around him. Steve heard Alex's voice, turned around, and saw Bucky standing nearby. A smile flickered across his face, and he said with a hint of surprise, "Alex, Bucky, you're here." Looking at the soldier in the lead, who is even more muscular than himself, Bucky's face darkened. He asked sharply, "Steve, what's going on?" Steve wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, shook his head, and said slowly, "It's okay, nothing happened." Steve didn't intend to pursue the matter, but someone else became even more arrogant. "Hey, you have help." The burly man in the lead, his arms folded, looked at Alex and Bucky with disdain. Alex was tall, but very thin, almost like Steve. Bucky was quite strong, but with 7 or 8 men facing him, Bucky alone was clearly not enough. Bucky, unwilling to be outdone, stepped forward and glared at the tall, muscular man provocatively. "What? You want to fight?" Bucky had been in countless fights in Brooklyn, and his opponents were all stronger and more numerous. Alex remained silent, taking a step forward, his actions making his stance clear. Steve wanted to offer some advice, but seeing Bucky and Alex's expressions, he clenched his fists and stood beside them. "What are you doing? You want to be kicked out?" A middle-aged man in a bright green second lieutenant's uniform rushed over with a menacing look on his face. The tall, burly man's expression changed immediately upon seeing the newcomers. He walked forward with a fawning expression, expertly pulling a cigarette from his pocket and respectfully offering it to them. "Lieutenant Daniel, it was these 3 who started the fight." Steve couldn't help but yell, "It was obviously you." Before Steve could finish, Lieutenant Daniel interrupted him with a wave of his hand, angrily barking, "Provoking trouble in the barracks, you'll be punished with a 30-kilometer cross-country run with a load." Alex and the other 2 were furious upon hearing this, and they began to argue. "Sir, they started the fight first, disrespecting your superiors. You'll be punished with an additional 20 kilometers, Lieutenant Daniel said, taking a deep drag on his cigarette, seemingly enjoying himself. Bucky was about to say more, but Alex reached out to grab him. He looked up at Lieutenant Daniel and said calmly, "New recruit Alex knows his mistake and will accept the punishment." Without further ado, he dragged Bucky and Steve away, grabbed his weights, and began the long-distance run. Bucky and Steve were filled with resentment, but they could only channel their anger into motivation, following closely behind Alex. After running for a while, Steve was already breathless, his frail body unable to bear such a heavy load. Seeing this, Alex and Bucky slowly slowed down and followed Steve. "I'm responsible for you." Steve took a difficult step, turning to look at the 2 people beside him with a look of guilt. Bucky spat and said angrily, "Steve, how can you be blamed for this?" "Blame that Daniel and that big guy." Bucky turned to look at Alex on the other side and asked with a puzzled look, "Alex, why did you hold me back just now?" "I wanted to beat them up." Alex smiled mysteriously, but did not explain. Because just now, he saw a strange man, wearing glasses and a dark gray plaid suit, completely out of place in the bustling military camp. More importantly, he was accompanied by a man, Colonel Phillips, the highest-ranking officer in the boot camp. The appearance of the man wearing glasses in the military camp was strange in itself, and with Colonel Phillips accompanying him, the man's identity was obvious: Abraham Erkins, the great doctor who invented the super soldier serum. Seeing these two people appear, and thinking of the plot in the movie, Alex immediately guessed that they were here to select test subjects for the super soldier project. In order to make a good impression on Steve, Alex could only suppress his anger and obey Lieutenant Daniel's punishment. As it turned out, Alex's approach was very effective. As he ran out, Alex saw a faint smile on Dr. Abraham Erkins's face. Chapter 29: Super Soldier Project. Why should he participate? Colonel Phillips turned his head to look at Dr. Abraham Erkins beside him, his wrinkled face full of confusion. He is the weakest of all the recruits I have ever seen. His arms are thinner than noodles. Being weak now doesn't mean you'll be weak in the future. Abraham took off his glasses, took out a glasses cloth, wiped them carefully, put them back on, turned his head to look at the three people who were gradually running away, his face calm. Okay, you decide. Colonel Phillips shrugged and said helplessly, but I still like Alex more. Hearing Phillips' words, Abraham suddenly hesitated. Alex is really good, he is the perfect experimental subject. After a pause, Abraham spoke again. Two choices, it's really hard to decide. Why can't there be one more experimental subject? Phillips was a little puzzled. He didn't understand science. If there were two, why not two together? Abraham paused, his expression shifting between joy and worry. Finally, he breathed a sigh of relief and said, that's a good idea, but the experiment will have to be postponed for a while. I've only prepared enough for one test subject. We have plenty of time before they can go to the battlefield. The next day, Colonel Phillips gathered all the new recruits. General Patton once said, war is won by weapons, but victory is won by soldiers. We will win this war because we have the best soldiers, and they'll get better and better. Much better. Phillips's sharp gaze swept over the new recruits, finally landing on the slight figure in the crowd. His voice paused slightly, his tone distorted. The thin figure was none other than Steve Rogers. Phillips grunted, looking away from Steve Rogers. He continued, the Strategic Scientific Reserve is a force formed by the Allied nations, comprised of the elite of the free world. Our goal is to build the finest army in history. Every army has pioneers. After this week, we will select them. They will be the first, our new generation of super soldiers. And they will personally send Adolf Hitler to hell. Off stage, all the new recruits couldn't help but get excited, eager to try. Alex had no particular idea. This pioneer would have to be Steve Rogers, and he didn't want to steal the glory that belonged to Captain America. After Phillips's speech, a stunning female officer emerged, her wavy reddish-brown hair captivating the entire group. One bold recruit spoke out, only to be knocked to the ground with a punch by the female officer. This frightened the entire new recruits into refusing any further inappropriate thoughts. After shocking the new recruits, the female officer introduced herself. Gentlemen, I am Agent Carter. I will be overseeing all matters of this unit. You will undergo even more brutal training, Carter. Alex looked at the beautiful agent, then turned to look at Steve beside him, a strange expression on his face. With Carter's appearance, the training at the base suddenly increased several levels. After several days of high-intensity training, many new recruits gave up, and only a few could persist. Although Steve couldn't adapt to such intense training, he was tenacious and never gave up. He persevered and persevered. Doctor, I think you have to reconsider the issue of experimental subjects. Outside the training ground, Phillips looked at Steve Rogers, who was doing push-ups with difficulty in the field, and said with some concern, he is really too thin. I almost cried seeing him training like this. Abraham frowned slightly, turned to look at Phillips and said seriously, I value quality more than body shape. You know how much effort we have put into this project. Looking at Phillips, who was about to talk endlessly, Abraham interrupted him helplessly. Yes, I know how much effort you have put in, then give me some rewards. Hodge passed all the tests. He is strong, fast, obeys orders, and is a soldier. He is a bully. It was he who bullied Steve and others, Abraham argued. You can't win a war with kindness, Doc, Phillips snorted, pulling a grenade from the nearby armored vehicle. You win a war with courage? Phillips pulled the safety cord and threw it onto the training ground, shouting, grenade. The new recruits undergoing special training on the training ground panicked and scattered. Only Steve leaped forward, clutching the grenade in his arms, shouting, run, hide. Alex didn't run, hide, or try to steal Steve's line. In fact, he had been looking forward to this scene. Although he had thought the scene ridiculous when he saw it in the movie, seeing it in person was deeply shocking. At the moment Philip's voice rang out, Alex's body unconsciously wanted to duck. But Steve rushed forward without hesitation, leaving Alex feeling ashamed. Seeing Steve's performance, Carter smiled, Abraham smiled, and Phillips, with a look of helplessness on his face, stubbornly said, "He's still too weak." After waiting for a long time without hearing the explosion, everyone poked their heads out of the bunker. Steve finally came to his senses and looked up at Carter in front of him, asking doubtfully, "Is this a test?" Carter nodded slowly, looking at Steve meaningfully, and said, "Congratulations, Steve, you passed the test." After waiting for almost a month, Alex couldn't help but feel excited to finally hear this news. Steve was finally going to embark on his own path, and the future Captain America was finally being born. Just as Alex was feeling happy for Steve, he noticed Carter walking towards him. "Congratulations, Alex, you passed the test too, huh?" Alex thought he'd misheard and looked at Carter in surprise. "What did you say?" Seeing Alex's stunned expression, Carter couldn't help but chuckle and repeated, "You passed the test and will become one of the first super soldiers." After confirming that he had heard correctly, Alex was a little confused. This movie was different. How could there be an extra one? And he didn't do anything. Thinking of this, Alex couldn't help but ask, "Why me? Don't you want to be a super soldier?" Carter asked instead of answering. Alex was stunned for a moment, then nodded quickly, yes. Although Alex possessed the two amazing skills of teleportation and cloning, his actual combat power was almost zero. If he could be injected with a super soldier serum and become a super soldier like Captain America, Alex had no reason to refuse. Chapter 30 Super Soldier Serum, Part 2. Entering the antique shop, Carter exchanged secret codes with the owner and smoothly entered the back hall. A door made of a converted bookshelf opened, revealing a secret laboratory base. Alex, familiar with the plot of the movie, showed no surprise from beginning to end, appearing calm and composed. Steve, however, looked around with curiosity, but he didn't ask any questions, following Carter closely. After passing through rows of guards, the three finally entered the actual laboratory. The laboratory, which was the size of 3 or 4 rooms, was filled with various instruments, and many researchers in white coats were busy at the equipment. In the center of the laboratory stood 2 laboratory tables, which must have been the same one Steve lay on in the movie. When the 3 entered the laboratory, everyone in the lab looked over, motionless, as if the scene had been frozen. It took a long time for the crowd to return to silence, and a solemn atmosphere enveloped the entire laboratory. Alex noticed the nervous expression on Steve's face, hugged Steve gently, and comforted him with a chuckle. "Steve, don't worry, we will become super soldiers." Punching the Japanese and kicking the mustache, Alex's strange tone made Steve laugh, and even Carter beside him couldn't help laughing. At this moment, Howard twisted his 2 sexy mustaches at the corners of his mouth and said in a strange voice, "Alex, no matter where you go, you always have such a good relationship with women." As he spoke, Howard turned his head to look at Carter, bowed very gentlemanly. "Howard Stark, meet this beautiful lady." Carter glanced at Howard coldly, turned around and walked away. Seeing Howard's embarrassed expression, Alex couldn't help but laugh, a hint of sarcasm lingering in his voice. "Howard, is this what you call a woman throwing herself at you?" Howard forced a laugh and quickly changed the subject. "So, you two are the guinea pigs today." Alex was deeply dissatisfied with Howard's nickname of guinea pigs and argued repeatedly, "What guinea pigs? They're clearly future super soldiers." Just then, Dr. Abraham walked over and looked at the 3 chatting and laughing with a relaxed smile on his face. "Are you ready, boys?" Seeing Abraham, Alex and Steve nodded and said seriously, "We're ready. Take off your clothes." Steve didn't hesitate at all, quickly stripping off his clothes. Alex, a little shy, glanced around to make sure no one was watching before slowly unbuttoning and undressing. Trousers, Steve quickly stripped off his shirt, his bony figure arousing a sense of pity. "Shouldn't I?" Alex turned to look at his white coat behind him, clutching his belt with both hands, as if he wouldn't take it off even if you asked him to. Abraham chuckled and pointed to the 2 lab tables nearby. "No, just lie down on them." Seeing that both of them had stretched out on the lab tables, Abraham stood in the middle, looked at them, and asked, "How does it feel?" "Are you comfortable?" "A little big," was Steve's answer. His thin frame only took up 2/3 of the lab table. A little hard, Alex, who was tall and neither too big nor too small, said, and a little cold, of course. More importantly, Alex was not used to being topless in front of so many people. Steve and Abraham couldn't help but laugh at this, and the tension eased again. Steve seemed to have completely let go of the tension in his heart. He looked at Abraham and asked with a smile, "Did you save any wine from last night for us?" "Not much, then you'd better prepare some now." "I can't wait to drink," Alex interrupted again, and turned to look at Howard, who had changed into a white coat again, and sarcastically said, "Howard, your clothes are really ugly." Howard's face changed several times. He glared at Alex fiercely, turned his head and looked at Abraham. "Doctor, everything is ready, we can start." Abraham nodded, took out a microphone from the side, flicked it lightly, and the microphone made a shrill scream, which focused the attention of everyone in the laboratory. "Today, we are not moving further towards extinction, but taking the first step on the road to peace. The first is a series of minimally invasive injections to inject serum into the muscle groups. The injection of serum will trigger rapid changes in cells, and then stimulate growth. Then, it will penetrate the main body through life rays." As Abraham explained without passion, other experimenters in the laboratory began to get busy. 2 experimenters pushed out an instrument, opened it, and saw a whole row of test tubes filled with light blue serum. When everything was ready, Abraham put down the microphone, turned his head and looked at Alex and Steve with a serious face. "Inject serum. Countdown begins. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. As soon as Dr. Abraham finished speaking, Alex felt as if his arms and chest were pricked by needles. Several streams of liquid seeped into his body through the needle holes little by little, and his whole body became restless. Seeing the serum injection complete, Abraham turned to Howard Stark, who stood ready. "Begin, Mr. Stark." Howard nodded and pulled the handle on the machine in front of him. The 2 platforms in the center of the laboratory suddenly moved. Iron shells quickly enveloped the platforms, leaving only a small glass window above the front. As Howard's voice echoed, 10%, 20%, Alex noticed that the small window suddenly lit up, as dazzling as the sun. Suddenly, a sharp pain hit Alex, and he felt as if his whole body was being torn apart. Alex couldn't help but scream, "Howard, stop dawdling. Hurry up." Alex knew he had to persevere. If he didn't, the experiment would fail. Howard chuckled wryly at this, his hands quickening considerably. 100%, after a flash of thunder and lightning, everything vanished. The white light vanished, the tearing pain vanished, replaced by an endless comfort that made one want to drift off to sleep. Alex actually fell asleep, not even waking up when the platform opened. His deep breathing indicated he was sound asleep. When the platform opened, everyone gasped in amazement. Alex and Steve had undergone tremendous changes. Steve had grown taller, practically filling the entire platform. His muscles were more defined, especially his chest, which was incredibly powerful. Alex's transformation wasn't as drastic as Steve's. His height remained the same, but his thin frame had become stronger. While his muscles weren't as pronounced and toned as Steve's, they were more symmetrical and aesthetically pleasing. It took a long moment for the stunned crowd to react and rush forward to help Steve and Alex off the platform. Steve, supported by Abraham, shakily stepped off the platform, muttering, "I did it." Abraham couldn't help but laugh at Steve's words. "Yes, we did it. Where's Alex?" "How is he?" Steve turned to look to the side. Alex, supported by the crowd, had also stepped off the platform. "Oh my God, he's asleep," someone exclaimed. The moment the exclamation rang out, a gunshot rang out. Chapter 31 American Brothers. After an indeterminate amount of time, Alex stretched himself awake. He glanced around and realized he wasn't in the lab he'd been in before, but somewhere resembling a hospital. The air was thick with the smell of disinfectant. "Doc," Alex jolted awake, and without a second thought, he prepared to teleport back to the lab. Before Alex could react, Steve, a completely transformed figure, pushed open the door and walked in, followed by Carter. Alex wasn't surprised to see Steve. He rushed forward, grasping Steve's muscular arm and demanding, "Steve, where's the doc?" Steve, watching Alex's anxious gaze, fell silent, his face darkening. After a moment's pause, he spoke, "The doc is dead. Killed by Hydra agents." Alex's heart pounded, his body swaying uncontrollably. He shouldn't have died like this. Alex blamed himself and felt remorseful. He'd been thinking about saving Dr. Abraham before the experiment began, but somehow, he'd fallen asleep, never even seeing him for the last time. Carter looked at Alex and Steve, pondered for a moment and said, "Even if he only succeeded this once, he would be proud of you, Alex." Looking at Alex with a guilty look on his face, Steve took a deep breath and joined in the comforting, "Although the doctor is gone, we are still here, and we must fulfill the doctor's wish, Hydra. I can't coexist with him." Alex's face changed when he heard this, and he said with gritted teeth with anger, "I'm going to the battlefield and fight an Hydra to the death. You are an experimental subject. You have to go to Alamato and undergo more experiments there." As soon as Alex finished speaking, Colonel Phillips in military uniform walked into the room with a gloomy face. His eyes moving back and forth between Alex and Steve. Steve pointed at himself, then at Alex, looked at Phillips and said excitedly, "The serum is working. We are super soldiers now. We can help. What I want is an army, but now, there are only you." Phillips' face looked even worse, and there was a hint of complaint in his tone. "You two, this is far from enough. Rome was not built in a day. We can build an army slowly." Alex didn't want to be a clown who sold national debt like in the movies, so he stepped in front of Phillips, stopped him and said righteously, "Besides, we are facing Hydra. No matter how many troops we have, it will be useless." "Alex, what do you want to say?" Carter stood up at the right time, and his position was also very magical. He blocked Phillips, who was about to pass over Alex. "I know you have had contact with Hydra before. If you have any ideas, just say it. We can unite the elites of the allies around the world and form a commando team. The number of people does not need to be too large." Alex looked at Carter gratefully and said quickly, "Go to the battlefield behind enemy lines to fight Hydra, destroy their laboratories, and chop off all their heads. Of course, we can also complete any other tasks." "Colonel Phillips, I think this is a good idea." Before Phillips could speak, Carter blocked his mouth first. "Steve has already drawn blood. Serum research does not require them to be present all the time. They are a powerful fighting force and we can't waste them." Phillips glanced at Carter, then turned to look at Alex and Steve, and snorted, "Let's set off tomorrow and go to London. Agent Carter, can I invite you to join us?" As soon as Phillips left, Alex started to recruit people. Steve realized it only after hearing Alex's words. He looked at Carter affectionately and said, "Carter, we need your help." "Yes, the strike team needs a base commander to help us gather intelligence and provide logistics." Alex shrugged and continued, "Of course, we also need someone to help us deal with the military. No one is more suitable for this position than you." Carter glanced at Alex, then at Steve, nodded, smiled, and said, "I look forward to working with you. Where's Howard?" Seeing Carter agree, Alex felt a little excited, remembering that the team was still short of an engineer. "We're working on the machine that the Hydra agents used to escape, but unfortunately, there's been no progress." Carter spoke without thinking, his mood somewhat down. "What do you want from him?" "The strike team needs strong combat power, and strong combat power cannot be achieved without equipment," Alex said as he walked out of the room. He was going to find Howard. "Howard, our engineer and equipment provider, that's a good idea. I think he'd be happy with it." Carter chuckled and followed Alex out of the room. After Alex's threats and inducements, Howard readily agreed to join the strike team and become their dedicated engineer. "Whatever you want, I can provide it." After dealing with two key members of the strike team, Alex and Steve prepared to gather with everyone before leaving for London. In their Brooklyn apartment, Alex invited his entire family over, and Vivian Lee, having heard about it, also forced herself to join them. "Tomorrow, we're leaving for London," Alex said, raising his glass, standing up, and looking around with a smile. "We'll beat up the mustache, chop down Hydra, and everyone, just wait for our triumphant return." Alex's words lightened the atmosphere, and everyone burst into laughter. "Brother Steve, how did you get so tall?" Once Alex was dressed, the change in his appearance was barely noticeable. Steve's transformation was so dramatic that everyone gasped in surprise upon seeing him. Monroe finally couldn't help but exclaim, "Taller than Brother Bucky." Bucky didn't harbor any resentment towards his brother's sudden transformation. On the contrary, he was delighted that Alex and Steve had grown so strong, and he accepted Alex's invitation to join the assault team. Hearing Monroe's words, Bucky leaned over to her head and, pretending to be angry, said, "Monroe, isn't my brother tall?" Monroe was a sharp person, and she could tell Bucky was pretending. She tilted her head, pointed at Alex and the other two, and said with a smile, "Well, Bucky is indeed the shortest now, Bucky was slightly stunned, and said self-deprecatingly, "I've become a dwarf now." The laughter rang out again, louder and more joyful than before. "I think the brothers should have a code name, just like the masked swordsman Zorro and the knight-errant Robin Hood." Audrey jumped down from her chair, ran to between Alex and Steve, and said with a smile, "American Three Brothers, how about that?" Vivian Lee chuckled and suggested, "Why not call us American Brothers? It's easier to say." Audrey nodded, reached out and pulled the hands of Alex and the other two, put them together, and smiled brightly. "American Brothers, united as one, we can achieve great things." Chapter 32 The First Mission. The next day, after bidding farewell to Audrey and the others, Alex, Steve, and Bucky boarded a warship bound for London, accompanied by Carter and Howard. After a long voyage, the ship finally arrived at London Harbour. Feeling the damp air, Alex couldn't help but complain, "I hate London's weather. It feels like I'm soaking in water." Colonel Phillips looked over at Alex and said expressionlessly, "Don't worry, you won't be in London for long." "Why is he always so sullen?" Bucky asked, puzzled, as he watched Phillips gradually disembark. "Who cares?" Alex ignored Phillips and turned to Carter. "Agent Carter, I need to find someone. Please help me with Phillips. I'll be back soon." Without waiting for Carter's nod, Alex impatiently disembarked and quickly disappeared into the crowd at the dock. Following Eisenhardt's address, Alex searched and asked around for the address. After half an hour, he finally found his destination, a low, gray-white apartment building on a narrow street. 204, Alex glanced down at the note in his hand. He pushed open the apartment's nearly moldy wooden door and ascended the stairs to the second floor. At the end of the hallway, he saw 204. He knocked, and soon a middle-aged woman opened the door. With hazy eyes, she asked in confusion, "Excuse me, who are you looking for?" Alex looked at the woman in front of him, puzzled. "Excuse me, is this the Eisenhardt residence?" After returning to London, everyone had been dispersed across the country by the British government. By the time Alex wanted to find the Eisenhardts, they had disappeared. The address on the note was the one Alex had asked Howard to get from the British military. "You've got the wrong guy," the woman said, angrily, as she was about to close the door. Alex, quick-witted, thrust his foot into the doorway. "Excuse me, my friend told me he lives right here. Fuck Eisenhardt. That monster moved away a long time ago." The woman stomped hard on Alex's foot, causing him to flinch in pain. But as soon as Alex flinched, the middle-aged woman slammed the door shut with lightning speed. No matter how hard Alex knocked, the woman refused to open. A demon? Did Max do something? Filled with confusion and helplessness, Alex could only leave, worriedly thinking, "I hope nothing happens to them." Returning to the base, Alex felt somewhat melancholy. He had originally planned to find Max and replicate his abilities, making everything easier. Unfortunately, Max was nowhere to be found, and it seemed he would have to rely on his own body for the rest of his life. Steve and Bucky rushed over to see Alex return, their faces brimming with excitement. "Mr. Stark is going to prepare uniforms for us. Steve, designed them. What do you think?" Alex, brushing aside his frustration, took a piece of paper from Steve's hand, glanced down, and smiled. "Not bad, I think it's great. Let's follow Steve's design." Steve's design for the uniform was similar to the one in the movie, with the same airplane cowl and the stars and stripes. Add the iconic shield, and you'd have a Captain America. "American Brothers, first mission's here." Just then, Carter approached, a faint smile on his delicate face. "A mission right after arriving? Is Phillips deliberately trying to make things difficult for us?" Alex hadn't expected a mission on their first day in London. Carter squinted at Alex and demanded, "Don't you want to take it?" "Of course not. I'd love a mission." Alex pushed Steve forward and whispered, "Captain, it's your turn." As expected, sparks flew between Steve and Carter. However, Steve wasn't very good at chatting with women, so Alex had to constantly create opportunities for them to talk, just to train Steve. Steve was a little embarrassed, but soon recovered and looked at Carter and asked seriously, "Carter, what is the mission?" Schmidt sent a force of 200 soldiers to fight, and less than 50 people came back. The others were either killed or captured. Carter turned to look at Alex and Bucky, and said in a deep voice, "They are all from the 107th Infantry Regiment, and among them are your former comrades. The mission is to rescue them, right?" Alex's face straightened and he said seriously, "Well, Schmidt, 107th Infantry Regiment, we have no reason not to go. I must tell you, These people were originally going to be abandoned, and no one was willing to rescue them. Carter looked down at the pile of information in his arms, and whispered, "They are 30 miles behind the enemy line. To rescue them, they must pass through the most heavily guarded area in Europe. Therefore, this mission is very dangerous." Alex frowned when he heard this, pondered for a moment and asked, "The equipment Howard prepared for us should not be ready yet, right?" "Yes," Carter nodded. Alex shrugged, turned to look at Steve and Bucky with a smile, and said loudly, "Then let's rescue them with our bare hands." Taking advantage of the night, Alex and his group set off. Howard flew the plane carrying the three of them to Austria, where a Hydra base, the 107th Infantry Regiment, was being held. Inside the plane, Alex and the other two, wearing makeshift uniforms, leaned against the cabin as Carter explained the operation plan. Hydra's base is in Klossberg, nestled between two mountain ranges, like a factory. "We'll escort you to the door. Get as close to the target as possible." Howard turned his head and warned, "You'd better return home as soon as possible. Hydra's Air Force is not to be trifled with." Alex remembered that their plane had been attacked by the Air Force in the movie, so as a precaution, Alex recommended that they leave as soon as possible. Alex walked to the hatch first, looking down. It was pitch black. "Let's get back. We're leaving." Alex leaped out. Steve and Bucky exchanged a glance, then jumped in without hesitation. "Are they all crazy?" Carter turned to Howard, a look of disbelief as he watched the three men vanish completely into the night. Howard chuckled and said nonchalantly, "Don't worry, Alex is no ordinary man. They'll be fine." "Alex, what's your plan?" Flying in midair, the gusts of wind from the rapid descent kept blasting into Steve's mouth, making it impossible for him to speak properly. He paused for a moment before saying a word. "Let's get down first." Alex teleported, grabbed Steve and Bucky, and landed on the ground in an instant. "Alex, how did you do that?" Alex's teleportation technique wasn't widely publicized. Only a few members of the Allied forces knew about it, and even fewer knew about it among the general public. Since they were going to fight together, Alex decided not to hide anything from his brothers. "I'm a mutant with special abilities. This is my power." Teleportation was a supernatural power, and Alex couldn't explain it, so he could only attribute it to his mutant abilities. Mutants, apparently, few people knew about mutants these days. And Steve and Bucky were even more confused. Alex patted their shoulders and said with a smile, "No matter who I am, we're brothers. Just remember that." "Yes, we are brothers. American brothers." Chapter 33 Rescue. The Hydra base was nestled in a small forest, its bright lights conspicuous in the darkness. Alex and the other two carefully approached with their sights. Seeing the heavily armed soldiers at the gate, Bucky expressed concern. "What should we do? Charge in?" Bucky turned to Alex. "Or, take us in. I can only take you where I see you." Alex was unable to lead them in, as he considered a strategy when the roar of engines reached him. Steve turned to see three military trucks approaching along the forest road. Alex couldn't help but chuckle. "Look! Here come the free trucks." With that, Alex leaped from the back of the truck like a cat, leaping onto the last one. Steve and Bucky exchanged a glance and followed, equally swift. As the two jumped into the truck bed, they heard Alex's soft shout, followed by the sounds of fists and kicks. Then they saw two unconscious men lying inside. Alex easily dispatched the two men. Turning to see Steve and Bucky jumping in, he quickly called out, "Help get them out." Without any inspection, the three of them slipped smoothly into the camp in the truck. Lifting the curtain at the rear of the truck, Alex carefully surveyed his surroundings. The camp was enormous, with factory-like buildings scattered around it. In the central open space stood rows of tanks, somewhat different from ordinary tanks, larger than standard tanks, but with significantly smaller gun barrels. Troops in black uniforms patrolled the area, and searchlights would occasionally sweep across the camp, demonstrating the tight security. When the truck stopped, Alex and the other two quickly emerged under cover of darkness and entered a nearby, brightly lit factory building. Entering the factory, the three were stunned by the sight. Massive bombs, over 3 meters tall, stood in the center of the building, densely packed, at least 1,000. Bucky, stunned, reached out and touched the giant bomb beside him, saying in disbelief, "What is Schmidt trying to do? Blow up the entire Earth?" "Schmidt's ambitions are bigger than a mustache." Alex, familiar with the plot of the movie, snorted sarcastically, "He wants to rule the world." Steve reached out and picked up a small, glowing blue object from a nearby table. He asked in surprise, What is this? There were many other objects like this around, some large, some small, but all of them had a strange blue glow. Alex had already seen them and sighed, saying, "This is the power of the Tesseract, the mighty power of the gods." With that, Alex said nothing more, using the giant bombs as cover to advance and search. A moment later, Alex found the prison cell where the prisoners were being held. It was actually located near the massive bomb factory, a tightly sealed wire mesh tunnel connecting the two areas. All the prisoners were locked in 2-meter square cages, 3 to 5 people per cage, with police patrolling above. Alex glanced at the patrolling police above the cells and turned to Steve. "Steve, you go take care of the patrol up there." He then turned to look at the wire mesh tunnel in front of him, where a dozen more were also guarding it. "I'll take care of those." Alex then turned to Bucky. "Bucky, you go rescue them later. We don't have much time, so we have to hurry. Before you leave, grab some guns, and once you're out, immediately send men to seize the tanks outside." Reality, after all, was different from the movies. Retrieving these prisoners from 30 kilometers behind enemy lines wasn't as easy as it seemed in the movies. Fortunately, the Hydra camp was well stocked with munitions, all-powerful energy weapons, so fighting their way back was still a good possibility. With a plan in place, Steve leaped onto the upper railing, flipped over, and with lightning speed, he overpowered the patrol officer. Alex, equally swift, rushed inside with Bucky. Alex reached for a bunch of keys from the officer's pocket, casually tossed them to Bucky, and shouted, "Bucky, help!" Bucky took the keys and scurried toward the nearest cage. He glanced at the lock, then down at the key in his hand, then looked up at the prisoner inside. "That key, who are you?" The black man with the eye patch stood up, his face filled with surprise. "American brother," Bucky said proudly, then found a key and inserted it. To his surprise, the door opened. "What did you say?" the one-eyed black man said, doubting his ears. "American brother, what the hell is this?" Bucky paid no mind to the caged occupant's confusion. He turned and ran to another cage, quickly unlocking it. This time, however, Bucky wasn't so lucky. He tried several times but couldn't get it open. "Let me do it." A small white man emerged from behind Bucky, grabbed the cage with both hands, and roared. The bars bent instantly, revealing a gap wide enough for a person. Bucky was stunned. The bars were each as thick as a thumb. The sheer force required to bend them was truly astonishing. Seeing everyone rescued, Alex suddenly remembered the movie and asked, "Is everyone here?" "There's an isolation ward in the factory. No one who was taken there has ever returned," the one-eyed black man said solemnly as he approached. Alex paused for a moment, then turned to Steve. "Steve, take them out. I'll go check out the isolation ward." In the movie, Bucky was used as a human experiment in the isolation ward by Zola. But for now, Bucky stayed by his side. Steve nodded in agreement, turning to look at the gathering crowd behind him. He raised his hand and shouted, "Let's fight our way out together and teach them a lesson." With a few roars, a group of people instantly burst through the iron mesh tunnel and into the massive bomb factory. Many skilled fighters were hidden among the prisoners. With them, Steve and Bucky, the factory's security guards were no match, annihilated in an instant, their weapons seized along the way. Seeing the crowds charging out the door, Alex turned and ran towards the factory's isolation ward. By then, the entire Hydra camp was in chaos, and the isolation ward was even more deserted. As he searched, Alex suddenly heard a painful gasp. He turned and saw a woman lying on an operating table in the shadows of a corner. A woman with red hair, she seemed somewhat disoriented, moaning unconsciously. Glancing around, seeing no one else, Alex thought for a moment, grabbed the woman, and ran away, hastily heading out of the factory. Chapter 34 Howling Commandos. Seeing Alex running out with a woman on his back, Bucky swatted a charging soldier away with the butt of his rifle and asked in surprise, "Alex, who is she?" "I don't know. We rescued her from the isolation ward," Alex said, lifting the woman on his back. "She's quite heavy, though." "She's Natasha Romanoff, a Soviet spy," the one-eyed black man, clutching a Hydra-developed energy gun, slowly approached, firing as he went, destroying over a dozen tanks. "Natasha?" Alex turned to look at the woman behind him, a look of disbelief on his face. The one-eyed black man destroyed the base's outer wall with another shot, chuckled, turned to Alex, and said, "So you know about this too?" "Introduce myself, Nick Fury." "Nick Fury?" Alex was stunned again. He hadn't imagined a mere rescue mission would lead to the rescue of two future greats, Natasha Romanoff and Nick Fury, the director of SHIELD. Just as Alex was at a loss for words, a tank roared up. Steve poked his head out of the tank and said, "Hey, guys, get on. Let's fight our way out." With over a dozen tanks leading the way, the group quickly broke free of the Hydra base. However, a large group of soldiers were chasing them from behind, and there were also soldiers ahead of them who had heard the news. 30 kilometers wasn't an easy trek. While energy guns and energy tanks didn't have to worry about ammunition, a single round could kill both the men and the tanks. Reality wasn't a movie. Seeing themselves about to be attacked from both sides, Alex made a quick decision to lead the way. "Steve, you lead the rear guard. I'll go ahead. I'll go with you." A short white man jumped out. Alex looked at the short white man and couldn't help but think of Steve before the experiment. They were about the same height. However, the short white man before him was much more muscular, comparable to Steve now. With that thought in mind, Alex extended his hand and introduced himself with a smile. "Alex, welcome aboard." The short white man pulled out a cigar from nowhere, dangling it between his lips, his expression carefree. "Logan, Logan." Alex eyed the short white man with some suspicion. The name reminded him of a famous Marvel character. However, the short white man before him was quite different from the Wolverine he'd imagined, especially in terms of height. "Let's go, what are you waiting for?" Logan waited for a long moment, then turned to Alex with a hint of irritation. Alex snapped back to his senses, nodded, and said gravely, "Let's go." Immediately, with that, Alex grabbed Logan with one hand and teleported out of the tank. He reappeared amidst the large group of soldiers directly ahead. Alex, ignoring Logan, pounced like a tiger descending from a mountain, striking down the stunned soldiers, his fists and kicks steadily crushing them. Logan quickly recovered, muttering a curse before roaring. 3 razor-sharp bone claws emerged from the backs of his hands, once again startling everyone. Alex happened to turn his head and saw the claws on Logan's hands. He couldn't help but curse, "That's fucking Wolverine." After a slight pause, he added, "Well, not even Wolverine with adamantium claws." Wolverine Logan's killing speed was clearly much faster than Alex's. Alex fought purely on instinct, relying primarily on the powerful physical and mental connection granted by the super soldier serum. Logan, however, was different. His battlefield experience had naturally honed the most deadly combat techniques. Combined with his bone claws and exceptional healing abilities, he could kill anyone with one, or even two with two. Witnessing Logan's immense combat prowess, Alex was inspired and began to consciously or unconsciously imitate Logan's movements, learning his battlefield fighting techniques. Simultaneously, Alex took advantage of the moment they were in contact to copy Logan's healing abilities. With his extraordinary healing abilities, Alex let go, unburdened by any fear of injury, and fought with all his might. Alex like this was terrifying, even more ferocious than Wolverine. In a matter of moments, the group blocking the path was decimated, with a few fleeing panicked into the surrounding woods, never to be seen again. After the battle, Alex and Logan retreated to the tank to rest, while Steve and Bucky fought off the pursuers. Looking across at Logan, who was leisurely smoking a cigar, Alex hesitated for a moment before inviting him. "Logan, I'd like to invite you to join our strike team." Logan picked up the cigar in his mouth, puffed out a puff of smoke, looked at Alex in surprise and said, "Strike team? Yes, us." Alex pointed at Steve and Bucky and introduced them one by one. "Steve, Bucky, and me, and we have 2 other logistics personnel. We're mainly fighting Hydra, but of course, we won't let go of the mustache either. Do you mind if I join?" One-eyed Nick Fury suddenly leaned over, his single eye fixed on Alex with anticipation. Alex turned to look at Nick Fury, nodded, and said happily, "Of course you're welcome. We welcome anyone who's willing to fight alongside us." Logan looked at Alex, then at Steve, took a deep puff of his cigar, nodded and said, "I don't care. It's all the same whether we fight anywhere." Alex was very excited to have recruited 2 generals, One-eyed Nick Fury and Wolverine Logan. In this way, the assault team was finally formed. The only thing to consider now was to give the assault team a resounding name. To be honest with you two, the commando team was just established not long ago and has not been named yet. Alex looked at Logan and Nick Fury, smiled awkwardly and said, "Since you are all members of the team now, what name do you think is better?" Everyone looked at each other in surprise. After a moment, Nick Fury widened his single eye, slapped his thigh and said loudly, "The Howling Commandos, what do you think?" No one nodded in agreement, and no one objected. Alex saw this and took it as everyone's tacit agreement. Then let's call it the Howling Commandos. The name is not important. What matters is what we do. Alex's words were unanimously agreed by everyone. While everyone was in a good mood, Alex said again, "I suggest that Steve be the captain of the commando team." "What do you think?" Steve was obviously stunned, pointed at himself, and said in confusion, "Alex, you did a great job. You should be the captain." This rescue operation was almost entirely directed by Alex, and he did a very good job. Steve and Bucky both trusted him. Alex shook his head, pointed to his head, and gave a wry smile. "I'm not cut out for this." Steve and Bucky were both stunned by Alex's actions. Only then did they remember that Alex's Chinese identity would severely restrict his future development and even affect the growth of the commandos. Nick Fury only then noticed Alex's black hair, shook his head, and cursed angrily, "Shit. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels." Chapter 35 Virus Experiment Base. After this period of training, Steve has already had the awareness of being a captain. He stood up with a shield in hand, looked at Carter and asked, "What mission?" "The intelligence department has discovered another Hydra base. The command means to send us to destroy this base and bring back all the information inside," Carter said as he handed a document in his hand to Steve, pointing to a slightly blurry photo on it and said, "The most important thing is to bring this person back, Baron Zemo." Steve opened the document in his hand and looked at the photo on it. What was particularly noticeable was the pair of eyes full of madness and bloodthirstiness. There was a text introduction next to the photo, "A Hydra scientist, one of the leaders of Hydra, proficient in all kinds of weapons, and also a master of combat, so powerful." Hearing Steve's words, Bucky raised the energy sniper rifle in his hand, made an aiming gesture, and said calmly, "It's just right, let's use it to try out the power of our new equipment." Logan walked out from the corner, a half-smoked cigar in his mouth, and said defiantly, "I've been resting for so many days, I'm going crazy." Alex chuckled and said nothing, but the dagger flying up and down in his hand showed his attitude. This mission is not easy. Seeing that everyone looked high-spirited, Carter couldn't help but pour cold water on them. This base is in Berlin, Germany. It is not only guarded by Hydra agents, but also protected by the German army. After a slight pause, he sighed and continued, "It will be very difficult to take over this base, Berlin." Alex frowned at the words, a little surprised. Why would the command send such a mission? No matter how important Baron Zemo is, it can't be like this, right? The others also changed their expressions when they heard Carter's words. The hot-tempered Logan stretched out his bone claws and roared angrily, "Are you going to kill us?" Logan has super self-healing ability and doesn't worry about life and death, but he is unwilling to die in vain. Carter gave a wry smile and shook his head. The frontline troops were attacked by mysterious weapons and were completely unable to resist, resulting in heavy casualties. If we don't find a way to counter these weapons, the Allies are likely to be defeated. Carter's gaze swept across the crowd, finally landing on Natasha. The spies hidden within the organization, despite exposing themselves, eventually discovered that these weapons were produced in this base. "So, we'll do this mission." Steve put away the documents, turned to look at the people around him, and said in a deep voice, "Anyone who doesn't want to go can withdraw now." "Berlin, it's nothing." Alex chuckled at Steve, his mind still thinking of the underground base where he had been imprisoned for several days. With Steve and Alex speaking up, the others naturally fell silent. They might still have some contempt for Steve, but they truly respected Alex and his friends. After leaving Howard's lab, Alex asked Steve for the information. After a quick glance, he found the base's location and other information, then quietly left. Before leaving, he told Steve, "Steve, I'm going to check over there first. You guys get ready." In a flash, Alex was back in the underground base. 6 months had passed, and the base remained unchanged, save for the thick dust covering the floors and tables. Glancing around, Alex immediately walked to the main door and opened it. The dark tunnel was filled with a stench of decay, forcing him to quickly close it again. Finding a gas mask in the base, Alex opened the door again and walked out. "That's much better," Alex sighed, heading out along the tunnel. But after a few steps, Alex discovered a body lying on the tunnel floor. The body was rotten beyond recognition, and rats were gnawing at its chest, chirping from time to time. Alex remembered that the last time he'd walked through this tunnel, it had been pristine. Passing the corpse, Alex continued forward, filled with wonder. Soon, another body appeared. After walking for half an hour, Alex had seen at least 100 bodies, some completely decomposed, others still intact. Alex found no wounds on the intact bodies, nor did they appear to have been poisoned or suffocated. Someone had simply died inexplicably, in this very tunnel. Thinking of the hundreds of bodies he'd seen, Alex felt a surge of anxiety, and his pace quickened. Soon, Alex reached the tunnel's exit, but to his surprise, the open door was blocked by an iron gate. Seeing the blocked exit, Alex pulled out his dagger and carefully drilled a small hole in the wall next to the gate. Through the hole, Alex squinted his eyes to see what was happening outside. Is this the Hydra base? Alex was a little dazed. Outside the iron gate, a factory had been built at some point, and people wearing Hydra insignias were coming and going in the factory. As he was dazed, a dozen young men with gray faces were held hostage by 5 Hydra agents and walked towards the iron gate. Behind them was a middle-aged man wearing a monocle, who kept muttering to himself as he walked. Thanks to Natasha, Alex learned German, and he understood the middle-aged man's words. It turned out that they were going to conduct an experiment called death spores, and the dozen gray-faced young men were the experimental subjects. Virus experiment. When Alex heard the word death spores, he thought of the human experiments conducted by the Japanese in the 3 northeastern provinces, such as corrosive mustard gas. Shocked, Alex tightened his grip on the dagger and peered through the small hole again, thinking to himself, 5 agents, 1 scientist. If there's no one else, we should act quickly. Before he could even decide if it was feasible, the group had already reached the iron gate. Alex teleported himself outside, his dagger slicing through the air. The first 2 Hydra agents collapsed, clutching their necks in horror. After dispatching them instantly, Alex kicked off with his feet, sprinting out and instantly reaching the other 3 Hydra agents. His dagger flew, and the 3 fell without a trace of surprise. Everyone was stunned. More than a dozen young men stood there in stunned silence, not knowing how to escape. Meanwhile, the scientist quickly recovered. To Alex's surprise, instead of running away, he roared and charged forward. His movements seemed practiced. P.S. Things are endless. I can catch up with today's 2 updates, but yesterday's update will probably take until late at night. Chapter 36. Another Baron. Alex was speechless as he watched the charging scientist. Do all Marvel scientists have a passion for martial arts? They're all skilled fighters. He grumbled inwardly, but his movements remained relentless. The battlefield techniques he'd learned from Logan left Alex no room for error, and each strike was a sure kill. Furthermore, the vicious scientist conducting human experiments reminded Alex of the Japanese, and he showed no mercy. To Alex's surprise, his fatal strike missed, and his opponent even took advantage to inflict a massive wound on him. Crimson blood instantly stained Alex's newly changed black uniform. Turning to look at the bayonet in the scientist's hand, then down at the wound on his side, Alex couldn't help but curse under his breath. Didn't they say it could withstand bayonets? Unfortunately, no one would answer Alex's question at this moment. The scientist sneered at Alex, but didn't immediately move forward, as if waiting for something. But he was soon surprised to discover that the wounds on Alex's waist and abdomen were healing at a visible rate. Seeing the surprise on the scientist's face, Alex secretly felt proud. He immediately activated his teleportation and appeared in front of the scientist in an instant, swiftly slashing his dagger towards the scientist's neck. To Alex's surprise, the scientist dodged again. A long sword suddenly appeared in the scientist's right hand, and he used it to parry Alex's dagger. Seeing the scientist holding a bayonet and a longsword, Alex couldn't help but frown. He tried to attack several times, but each time failed, and he was even injured by the scientist several times. The combination of the long and short blades was difficult, and Alex felt quite powerless. I need to practice more when I get back, Alex sighed and prepared to retreat. One scientist had already left him helpless, and if a large group of Hydra agents came, Alex would be even more vulnerable. Leaving the scientist behind, Alex quickly rushed over to the dozen or so young men and spoke a few words rapidly. His telekinesis immediately spread out, enveloping them, and he activated teleportation, instantly wielding the group. Thanks to the cosmic cube, Alex's teleportation abilities had been greatly enhanced, even stronger than in his previous life. He could teleport a dozen people without any problem. Seeing Alex return with a dozen young men, the commando team members all looked at him in surprise. "Carter, I leave these people to you." Alex unceremoniously handed the men to Carter, motioning for the others to follow him into the inner room. "Alex, are you injured?" Steve quickly noticed the wounds on Alex's body. With his super strong self-healing ability, there would naturally be no wounds, but the large pool of blood was a terrifying sight. Alex nonchalantly lifted the corner of his shirt to indicate the wound was healed. Then, turning to look at Howard beside him, he pointed at the scratch on his shirt and said angrily, "Howard, didn't you say the shirt could withstand the bayonet?" "What's going on?" Howard was slightly stunned. He frowned and walked closer. After examining it carefully for a moment, he explained, "That bayonet is definitely not an ordinary bayonet. It must be made of a special material, similar to your dagger." Alex thought for a moment and nodded, saying, "Yes, his bayonet does look different." "Alex, who hurt you?" As Alex's combat training instructor, Logan was very upset that his apprentice had been injured. "A scientist," Alex explained with a twitch of his lips. By this time, Carter had already arranged a dozen young men, pushed open the door and walked in, and when he heard what Alex said, he frowned slightly and asked, "Describe his appearance." "It's him, Baron Strucker." After listening to Alex's description, Carter said with extraordinary certainty, "Baron Strucker, a big shot around Hitler, and also one of the leaders of Hydra. His status is no less than that of the Red Skull. Why is it a Baron again?" Alex's focus was obviously different from everyone else's. After hearing that this Strucker was another Baron, he couldn't help but complain, "Isn't the Baron worthless? Everyone is a Baron." Strucker was born into the upper aristocracy of Prussia. His family is full of military leaders. The previous generation has been associated with Bismarck. They have a high status, and the baronship is hereditary. Natasha chuckled and said slowly, "Strucker was recruited by Hitler to join the army in 1934, and later served as the leader of the Skull Commando." Turning around and glancing at everyone, Natasha continued, "Also, Hydra was actually founded by him, and Red Skull replaced him later. However, his influence in Hydra is very great, no less than Red Skull. Turns out he's a big guy." Alex hadn't expected that he'd stumbled upon such a big shot by accident, and said with a look of self-mockery, "We didn't find Baron Zemo, so finding this Baron Strucker wouldn't be bad either. We're going to kill him anyway, so let's get rid of this one first." Logan didn't care which Baron it was, he would just do it. "Okay, let's go now." Steve raised the newly decorated shield on his wrist and said in a deep voice. Alex thought for a moment, shook his head, and said, "Let's not do that. Doing so will only alert the enemy and hinder our efforts to capture Baron Zemo. Command wants Baron Zemo, not Strucker. Strucker is on Command's list, but he's more difficult to kill, so Command hasn't issued a related mission yet. Carter is the liaison officer between the Howling Commandos and the Allied forces. She is most familiar with the Allied forces' strategic planning and tactical objectives." Alex rolled his eyes at this and said sarcastically, "Will Command want us to assassinate Mustache someday? That sounds great. How about we do it?" Logan's eyes lit up when he heard this, and it was obvious that he was very interested in the proposal. Alex dropped to his knees, chuckling awkwardly. I was just kidding, that's all. Let's go kill the Baron." Steve chuckled, raised his shield, and shouted, "Let's go." Alex's telekinesis spread out, enveloping Steve, Bucky, Logan, Nick Fury, and Natasha. The teleportation vanished from the camp, and in an instant, it was back at the end of the tunnel, in front of the Iron Gate. Alex had no idea what lay beyond the gate. Just in case, he chose to stay there and explore the situation outside. Through the small hole, Alex saw that the situation outside was almost unchanged from when he left. Baron Strucker had once again gathered a dozen or so people, seemingly to conduct further human experiments. The people are outside. After observing for a moment, Alex turned his head and looked at the people behind him who did not move, and whispered, "I will take you out later. After we go out, Steve and Logan will deal with Strucker. Nick and Bucky will deal with the Hydra agents inside, and Natasha will be ready to respond at any time." He paused slightly and continued, "I will go outside and stop the people outside." After the plan was finalized, Alex and everyone immediately appeared outside the Iron Gate. P.S. The second update is sent, and the supplement will be sent to you at midnight. Chapter 37 Death Spores. Strucker wasn't the least bit surprised by the sudden appearance of Alex and the others, seemingly having anticipated it. And indeed, at Strucker's command, hundreds of soldiers armed with massive energy guns suddenly emerged from all directions, their fist-sized muscles resembling cannon barrels. Falling in a trap, Alex, unfazed, surveyed his surroundings leisurely, his tone tinged with a hint of teasing. Natasha gently brushed her hair from her ear and said calmly, "I suppose so, Captain. What are your plans?" Logan thrust his hands forward, a pair of bony claws slowly piercing the skin on the backs of his hands, a ferocious and terrifying sight. Steve chuckled softly, suddenly flinging his shield and charging forward at high speed. His commanding voice lingered in the air. "Attack!" With Steve's movement, the howling commandos sprang into action in an instant, charging like wolves, ferociously towards the prey. Having been assigned their positions, each soldier sought their respective targets. The scene was a bit chaotic, but it was all about order. Alex took in the situation and saw that the crowd's performance was beyond his wildest dreams. The weapons and equipment Howard had provided were incredibly powerful. In a matter of moments, hundreds of soldiers were decimated by Nick Fury and Bucky. Nick Fury's heavy machine gun, in particular, was like a death scythe, sweeping across the area. The soldiers suffered heavy casualties, and Baron Strucker was in a state of disarray. With Wolverine, a true master of combat, Strucker's performance pales in comparison. With Steve flanking him, Baron Strucker's body was riddled with bloody wounds in a matter of seconds, inflicted by Logan's bone claws. Seeing the situation settled, Alex immediately ran outside. His task was a formidable one, to intercept the incoming soldiers and Hydra agents. To prepare for such a group fight, Alex had scavenged several energy guns from the fallen soldiers. Watching the massive wave of soldiers charging towards him, shouting, he opened fire with 2 energy guns, one on the left and one on the right, pelting the crowd with volleys of energy. The energy in the energy guns, derived from the cosmic cube, was so immense that a single shot would dissolve a person in trash, instantly vanishing. The destructive power of the 2 guns was astonishing, and people were constantly falling under their blast. However, 2 fists were no match for 4 hands, and the enemy finally charged forward, fearing their own mortality. Alex, prepared, ripped the energy crystal from the gun, struck it hard, and then tossed it into the crowd like a grenade. With a bang, the energy crystal exploded, encompassing an area of more than 10 meters. The enemy flew backward, spitting blood. The lucky ones managed to survive, but the unlucky ones were instantly killed. After several blasts, the swarming enemy finally stopped their charge and retreated. No one was foolish, they would rather die than seek death. "Thanks, Howard," Alex said playfully, tossing out several more blasts, driving back several more enemy soldiers who were trying to sneak up, and then immediately returned to the base. Inside the base, no one was left standing except for the howling commandos and Baron Strucker. "Captain America, do you think you've won?" Baron Strucker gave a strange smile upon seeing Alex appear. Suddenly, a remote-like device appeared in his hand, with a glaring red button in the middle. Logan retracted his bone claws, folded his arms across his chest, and said calmly, "Do you still have the chance to escape?" "Why would I?" Strucker rested his thumb on the red button, his smile growing even more sinister and frightening. "With you bared with me, I, Baron Strucker, have won." Explode. Death spores. With Strucker's roar, the entire base suddenly shook violently, and countless death spores emanated from all directions, instantly covering the entire base. Alex's face paled at this, his mind racing to the bodies in the tunnel. "Everyone, be careful. These spores are poisonous," he shouted, quickly spreading his telekinesis to envelop everyone. Teleporting them out of the base and back to the campground, Alex immediately glanced at everyone, anxiously asking, "Are you all okay?" Steve glanced down at himself, a look of surprise on his face. "I'm fine. I feel fine, nothing's wrong at all." Logan, Nick Fury, and Natasha all shook their heads, confirming they were fine. Bucky didn't respond, so Alex reached out and patted his shoulder, asking again, "Bucky, are you okay too?" To everyone's shock, Bucky's body collapsed to the ground beneath Alex's palm. Alex and Steve paused for a moment before coming to their senses. They rushed forward, frantically lifting Bucky to his feet. Holding Bucky's head, they anxiously called out, "Bucky! Bucky!" Howard, hearing the noises, rushed over. Seeing Alex and Steve cradling Bucky and weeping, he looked at the other 3 with a puzzled look. "What happened?" Hearing Howard's voice, Alex quickly stood up and grabbed Howard's arm. "Howard, come check on Bucky. What's wrong with him?" Logically, if the death spores had worked, The others shouldn't have been unharmed. But if they hadn't, what about Bucky? Howard, a mechanical engineer but not a doctor, heard Alex's request and awkwardly stepped forward to take a look. What happened? Howard observed that Bucky's bodily functions were intact. He had simply fallen unconscious for unknown reasons. Alex recounted what had happened, then looked at Howard nervously. What are death spores? Is Bucky going to be okay? Howard, who had been calm at first, froze when he heard about death spores. He didn't even hear Alex's last question clearly, muttering to himself in disbelief. How could it be death spores? How could it be death spores? Seeing Howard mumbling absent-mindedly, Alex couldn't help but yell, Howard, tell me, what exactly are death spores? With that yell, Howard suddenly snapped back to his senses. He looked down at Bucky, who was in Steve's arms, and after a long silence, he explained, death spores are a special virus that can kill people after multiplying in large numbers in the human body. Death? Alex and Steve suddenly looked up, their eyes filled with horror. Why are we all okay? Nick Fury lowered his heavy machine gun, surprise filing his dark face. We were all in the death spore atmosphere, so how did Bucky get into trouble? Steve quickly regained his composure, looked at Howard anxiously, and asked, is there any way to save Bucky? Howard smiled bitterly and spoke slowly. There's no cure, but cold temperatures can slow the virus's growth. Freeze Bucky immediately. I'll go find Hydra, Alex said, and disappeared in an instant. Alex figured that since Strucker could develop these death spores, there must be an antidote. But when Alex returned to the base, the death spore atmosphere had vanished. The vast base was deserted, and Baron Strucker lay on the ground, lifeless, dead. P.S. Updates are here. Scorpio is so sleepy. Go to bed now. We have to get up early tomorrow. Chapter 38. They are not ordinary people. Alex was completely stunned as he watched Baron Strucker, seemingly dead beyond death. If even he, the instigator, perished in the death spores, surely Bucky was in grave danger? But why are the rest of us okay? Panicked, Alex's mind suddenly resonated with Nick's earlier words, and a flash of inspiration struck him. Could it be the super soldier serum? With this thought, Alex returned to the camp, which was deserted. Alex teleported to the lab again, and sure enough, everyone was there. Bucky lay unconscious in ice water nearby, surrounded by a group of people. Howard and the other scientists in the lab were busy working nearby. The lab lacked a device capable of maintaining long-term low temperatures, so they needed to build one. Alex glanced at everyone, pulled Howard aside, and whispered, Howard, Steve and I are fine. Do you think it's because of the super soldier serum in our bodies? Howard pondered for a moment, and said uncertainly, it may be related, or it may not be related. We have done very little research on death spores, and we have only heard about it. Unfortunately, all the information in that base has been transferred. Alex sighed regretfully, and then returned to the original topic. If I donate blood to Bucky, can you wake up? The effect won't be too great. Howard looked up at Alex, shook his head and said seriously, a little blood can't change Bucky's physical condition at all. Then give more. Alex said immediately without thinking, as long as Bucky can be saved. When Alex was in the most desperate time, it was Bucky and Steve who helped him. They did not discriminate against him because he was Chinese. They paid for his medical expenses when he was unconscious. Alex recognized these two brothers in this life. Hearing the noise, Steve and the others turned to look. Steve stepped over to Alex, locked eyes, and said firmly, if Alex's isn't enough, you can take mine. Logan was very direct, rolling up his sleeves to reveal his wrists, and nonchalantly saying, take as much as you want. Actually, I was once inoculated with a super soldier serum. It's a variant, but it should have some effect. Black came up, swaying his waist, his red hair cascading over his shoulders, looking very sexy. Nick Fury pointed coolly at his chest. I have the infinity formula within me. The infinity formula? Professor Bertold Sternberg's infinity formula, Howard suddenly exclaimed, quickly covering his mouth with a look of disbelief. Last year, I accidentally stepped on a landmine, and Professor Sternberg injected me with the infinity formula, Nick Fury said, pointing to his eye with a patch. Although I survived, it's a pity that my eyes can't be repaired. Infinity formula? What is that? Alex looked at Howard in surprise. After hearing that Nick Fury had the infinity formula in his body, Howard became extremely excited. The infinity formula was invented by Newton in 1652 and later perfected by Professor Bertold Sternberg. The infinity formula is like the legendary elixir of life. It will not strengthen the body, but it can greatly prolong human life and maintain youth and vitality. Before Howard could speak, Natasha spoke first, her tone very serious. But the infinity formula is like drugs. It must be injected continuously. Once it is discontinued, the aging rate will be very fast. Nick Fury on the side nodded and said helplessly, "Yes, I have to inject it every year, and I just got it not long ago." "Can it make you immortal?" Alex was completely speechless. What kind of world is this Marvel world? It is even more awesome than the world of immortal heroes. Not to mention all kinds of incredible superpowers. The key is that there are all kinds of black technologies rampant. A mortal can become a Superman by drinking a bottle of medicine. It's just theoretical mortality, Howard said with a smile, shaking his head. But living for 100 or 200 years shouldn't be a problem. Never mind, let's not talk about that. Let's save Bucky first. Alex didn't have much of an opinion on the Infinity Formula. There were plenty of immortality claims in Marvel, and the Infinite Formula wasn't Alex's first choice. Furthermore, the Infinity Formula wasn't true immortality, which made Alex even less impressed. Alex's reminder brought Howard back from his euphoria over the Infinity Formula, and his expression grew serious. "Are you really going to do this?" Seeing everyone nod, Howard said with some resignation, "I don't know how effective this will be. It might save Bucky, or it might not. It's better to try than to do nothing." After half a day of blood transfusions, Alex and the other three had each donated nearly half their blood to Bucky. Sadly, to everyone's disappointment, Bucky didn't seem to be getting any better and remained comatose. The fusion of 4 people's blood still couldn't save Bucky. Alex was in despair, and endless rage burned in his chest. He wanted to kill. Watching Alex suddenly disappear, Steve sighed, turned to look at Howard, and asked hopefully, "Is there no other way?" Howard smiled bitterly, shook his head, and said, "For now, we can only freeze Bucky and save him for later to find a way to crack the death spores." He paused slightly and pointed to the freezing device that other scientists in the lab had made temporarily. "This device can only maintain the frozen state temporarily, so it's best to send Bucky back to the United States as soon as possible." Carter stepped forward and patted Steve on the shoulder. He whispered, "There's a ship leaving for the United States tonight, and Bucky can go back with it." Looking down at Bucky lying in the freezing water and thinking about Alex's condition, Steve really couldn't leave this task to him. He nodded and said, "Okay." That night, Bucky, sealed in a cryogenic iron box, boarded an empty ship bound for America. As the ship pulled out of port, Alex appeared on the streets of Berlin, searching for the Hydra base where Baron Zemo was located. With Baron Strucker dead, Alex shifted his hatred to the rest of Hydra, targeting not only Zemo but also the Red Skull. Using the information Carter had provided them, Alex quickly located a heavily guarded factory, which turned out to be Baron Zemo's base. Pulling out his dagger, he flicked it through the air, and Alex vanished in an instant. That night, the air was filled with blood. Chapter 39 Revenge. Alex didn't return to the camp until late at night, covered in blood. Steve was bewildered, his eyes still furious and his body smeared with blood. "Alex!" Nick Fury rushed over and supported the staggering Alex, a fierce glint in his single eye. "Alex, why didn't you call us?" Alex's expression made everyone guess what he was going to do. Alex grinned, revealing his white teeth, which only made the blood on his face appear even redder. "I'll call you guys sometime." Alex turned to look at Carter again, staggering drunkenly. "The mission is accomplished, but Baron Zemo and the data are gone." Carter glanced at Steve beside him, smiled softly, and said, "It's gone, so what? Destroying the base is good enough." Alex nodded without another word, turned, and walked out, heading towards the nearby barracks. Logan stood up, an unlit cigar between his lips. He spoke a few words and then walked out in a dashing manner. "A true man must avenge his enemies. If anyone offends me, I will repay them tenfold," Nick Fury said as he wiped the blood from his chest, his dark face full of ferocity. Natasha raised her eyebrows slightly, her peach blossom eyes shining. "He's brave, a real man." Watching everyone leave one by one, Steve became even more confused. He turned to look at Carter beside him. "Is this really right, Steve? This is war. There's no right or wrong in war, only wins and losses." Carter shook his head, his voice a little low. "Alex may have gone too far, but it was definitely right." Steve lowered his head, remembering Dr. Erkins's finger on his chest before he died, and the words Dr. Erkins had warned him. He couldn't help but ask, "Is it so hard to be a good person?" Carter didn't answer. She didn't know how to answer. so she just remained silent. Alex returned to the barracks, lay down on the bed without changing his clothes, turned over and fell asleep. The next day, at noon, Alex was awakened by a loud noise. Rubbing his sleepy eyes, he shouted angrily, "What the hell are you yelling about? Can't we sleep anymore? The big star is coming, they're all crazy." Natasha's voice suddenly rang in his ears. Alex turned his head in confusion and found Natasha sitting by his bed. He was startled and asked in surprise, "Why are you here?" Natasha giggled and did not answer. Instead, she said, "Alex, do you know how much noise you made last night? Even Hitler was alarmed. He even issued a kill order and ordered Hydra to capture you with all their strength. If you make me angry, I will kill the little mustache," Alex had just complained when cheers rang out outside. He frowned. "You said the big star is coming. Who is it?" "Vivian Lee," Natasha shrugged with disdain. Alex stood up abruptly upon hearing this, asking in surprise, "Why is she here?" Natasha, a top spy, immediately noticed the quirk in Alex's tone, and with a hint of concern, she asked, "Do you know her?" "She's my sister's adopted mother," Alex muttered, not even bothering to change his clothes as he ran out. Natasha was startled, then ran out after him. As she reached the door, she saw Alex walk in with Vivian Lee, a sullen expression on her face. "What brought you here?" Alex asked, looking at Vivian Lee, whose face flushed slightly. "Audrey and Monroe, are they alright?" "They're both fine. They're very popular in Hollywood. Many directors want to cast them in their films." Vivian Lee rolled her eyes, then smiled coquettishly. "As for why I'm here, guess what? The United States sent a cultural troupe to the front lines to give a performance. Miss Vivian Lee should be with the group." Natasha smiled softly as she approached. "Excuse me, who are you?" Vivian Lee only just noticed the other people in the room. Her expression changed slightly as she asked in surprise. "Natasha Romanoff, my teammate," Alex introduced, then turned to Vivian Lee and said sternly, "We'll have to go back immediately after the show. It's not safe here." Vivian Lee smiled but said nothing. Just then, Carter, Steve, and the others suddenly ran in, their faces utterly panicked. "Alex, the ship was blown up by Hydra last night," Carter said anxiously, breathing slowly. Alex was confused. Looking at Carter, Steve, and the others, he asked, bewildered, "What ship?" "The one carrying Bucky." Natasha's expression changed, and she looked at Alex with some concern. "Bucky must be returned to the United States as soon as possible. We decided to send him back overnight, but we didn't expect." Alex's rage, which had been subsiding, suddenly flared up again, even more fierce than before, howling, "Commandos, assemble!" Seeing Alex's gloomy expression, Steve was a little worried, afraid that Alex would do something irrational. "Alex, don't be impulsive." "Steve, no need to say more." Alex waved Steve to interrupt Steve, his eyes sweeping over the team. "I swear to fight Hydra to the end. Who of you is willing to join me?" "Isn't our target Hydra?" Logan rarely had a cigarette in his mouth. He folded his hands on his chest with a faint mocking smile on his face. Alex was ruthless this time and really angry. "Okay, let's set off immediately. I want to uproot Hydra." "Alex, take me with you." Steve saw that Alex seemed to be leaving him behind and quickly stepped forward. "Bucky is my brother too." "Good brother." Alex pulled Steve up with one hand, and his mental power instantly spread out to wrap around everyone. He immediately activated mental transmission and disappeared from the spot in an instant. "Miss Vivian Lee." Carter just opened his mouth to send Vivian Lee away, but Vivian Lee suddenly came to her senses, took Carter's hand, and asked anxiously, "What happened to Bucky? What are Alex and the others going to do?" Carter knew about the relationship between Vivian Lee and the three Alex brothers for a long time. Hearing this, he simply recounted what happened yesterday, "And now they are going for revenge," Vivian Lee exclaimed. Her pretty face turned pale, and her eyes couldn't help but moist. "The relationship between the three brothers is really good. Now that Bucky is gone, Alex must be very sad." After muttering to herself for a while, Vivian Lee suddenly came to her senses and asked worriedly, "Will they be in danger if they go like this?" "It shouldn't be." Carter said this, but he was praying secretly in his heart, "I hope not." Chapter 40: Zora Trap. After realizing that Red Skull was intent on breaking with the Nazis, Alex knew his time was running out. According to the film's plot, Red Skull would bomb major cities around the world, and Steve would fall into the deep sea during this operation, frozen for 70 years. However, Alex couldn't confirm the exact time. With such urgency, Alex led the Howling Commandos in a frenzied destruction campaign across German-occupied territory, sparing no weapons factory or barracks, including a secret Hydra base they accidentally stumbled upon. This frenzied destruction seemed to enrage the previously stoic Hydra. Thousands of Hydra's Black Army launched a siege, deploying one of their few land cruisers. The land cruiser, a massive tank 4 stories tall, had a massive, black muzzle resembling an all-consuming black hole, making it incredibly dangerous. Meanwhile, the Howling Commandos sat leisurely in a small building, watching the approaching Hydra army and the terrifying tank. "That tank looks pretty scary," Nick Fury said, gesturing with his heavy machine gun and then turning to look at the massive tank. He said with some envy, "That tank must be incredibly exciting to drive, then I'll grab it and give it to you as a birthday present," Alex said casually, not taking the land cruiser seriously at all. Nick Fury grinned, revealing 2 rows of white teeth. "That's great. Let's drive it all the way to Berlin and blow that mustache guy to pieces. I don't want to be a target," Natasha said with disdain, adjusting her wristband. "This thing looks good but it's useless. On the battlefield, it's just a target. One bomb would destroy it." Steve was the only one standing aside, keeping a serious eye on the approaching Hydra army. Seeing the Hydra army getting closer and closer, Steve had to warn them, "Time to get ready, wait until I finish this cigar." Logan reclined on a sofa in a small building, puffing away in a comfortable manner. Steve glanced at everyone with a hint of resignation, finally settling on Alex. "Relax, Steve." Alex turned to look at the army approaching the building, a sly smile of triumph on his face. "Nick's feast hasn't arrived yet, there's no need to rush." Alex had barely finished speaking when a sudden, deafening bang erupted, and the entire building shook violently. It worked. Alex snapped his fingers, looking admiringly at Nick, who was grinning beside him. "Nick, good job. I hope it didn't damage my tank." Nick peered out of the building with his single eye. The thick smoke and dust obscured his vision, and all he could hear was the continuous wailing below. "If I'd known about it, I would have used fewer bombs." The pre-planted bombs wiped out nearly half of the Hydra army. Most of the remaining men were injured, and many were knocked unconscious by the blast, saving Alex and the others a lot of effort. Half an hour later, the entire Hydra army was completely wiped out, leaving only the rather useless land cruiser behind. "Come on, let's go in and take a look." Nick eagerly slung his heavy machine gun behind his back, grasping the hull of the massive tank with both hands and attempting to climb up. Alex chuckled, pulled everyone together, and teleported directly to the top of the tank. Steve swung his shield, knocking open the tank's turret door, casually flinging a Hydra inside the doorway out of the tank and diving in first. Once inside, everyone realized that the occupants had been stunned by the bomb, hence the silence. Nick didn't care, excitedly rushing to the tank's command post. In a matter of seconds, he figured out the route, and in a few seconds, the stalled tank started up again. "There's a radio here," Natasha pointed to the side of the tank's command console, where a radio with a Hydra logo sat atop it. It should be Hydra's dedicated radio. Despite fighting so many battles and killing countless enemies in Hydra, the Howling Commandos had yet to capture a Hydra radio. Consequently, they had been unable to locate any trace of Hydra. Alex, upon seeing the Hydra radio, became excited and pointed at Natasha, saying, "Quick, check what news there is." Natasha fiddled with the radio for a moment, then turned to Alex and said, "Zora." "News on Zora, so lucky." Alex looked at Natasha in disbelief. "Isn't it on a train?" Alex's mind inevitably turned to Bucky. In the movie, Bucky fell off a train while trying to capture Zora. "How clever," Natasha said with a charming smile. "Zora's escorting a shipment of equipment to the front, so he'll be on the train." "Okay, let's go find him," Alex said with a smile, calming himself. Atop a cliff, the wind and snow fell in torrents. Below the cliff lay a narrow railway track, where Zora's train would soon pass. Because Alex was there, the group didn't use a long rope like in the movies. While it was more convenient, it also lacked the excitement. In the chilly wind, Alex sat on a rock, slightly silent. "Alex, what's wrong?" Steve, flipping his shield in his hands, sat down beside Alex and turned to look at him. "You've been different since you came here." Alex regained his composure and looked at Steve, his face filled with hope. "Steve, do you think Bucky will be rescued?" Alex had always harbored the fantasy that Bucky would be rescued like in the movies. Even if he became Hydra's official assassin, it would be fine, as long as Bucky stayed alive. Steve's face darkened at this, and he fell silent. Here they come. Following Natasha's warning, a train barreled down the cliff face at breakneck speed. Logan snuffed out his cigar and gazed at the speeding train, a look of dismay on his face. Are they in a hurry to be reincarnated? They're running so fast. Alex patted his hips and stood up, chuckling softly. Yes, they really are. As soon as he finished speaking, Alex pulled everyone together and teleported to the roof of the speeding train. The oncoming wind and snow blew directly into their mouths and noses, making them extremely uncomfortable. After a moment of adjustment, Steve, shield raised, led the way, climbing down the train, kicking open a door and entering. As the group entered the train, triumphant laughter echoed all around. Hearing the familiar laughter, Alex frowned. His face looked a little ugly. Zora, the teleporter, Captain America, and the Great Howling Commandos. Zora's laughter rang out again, becoming more and more proud. Welcome to the death train. This is a trap. Natasha's face changed, and she looked at Alex and shouted quickly, let's go, let's go. Go? Why should we go? Alex snorted coldly, looked up and looked around and cursed loudly. Zora, you shorty, get out of here right now. I'm going to kill you. Alex's sudden move stunned everyone. Steve and others stared at Alex in amazement, and it took them a while to come back to their senses. Alex, you. I have some grudge against him, so I'll curse a few times to vent my anger first. Alex shrugged nonchalantly. I'll do something cruel later. Zora was standing at the front of the train. When he heard Alex's insults, his face flushed with anger. He took a deep breath and snorted coldly and said, wait to die, you guys. Chapter 41 Train Battle, Part 1. After turning off the speaker, Zora turned to look at Strucker and Zemo beside them, smiling. You two, we've already lured them here. What to do next is up to you. Raising the heavy artillery, transformed from the energy of the cosmic cube, Baron Strucker walked away with a sinister look on his face, passing through the middle door and disappearing into the front of the car. Zemo, unable to speak or show any expression, simply waved his sword and followed Strucker away. Watching the two leave, Zora's round face cracked with a strange smile. Prepare for death, you two. Alex and the others discussed and decided to split up. Steve, with Logan and Nick, continued forward, while Alex and Natasha climbed back onto the roof, heading directly to the front, where Zora was most likely. Braving the wind and snow, Alex climbed onto the roof, stabilizing himself and preparing to teleport, when Natasha slipped and fell directly onto Alex. Alex stumbled and nearly fell off the train. Finally catching himself, he looked at Natasha with an angry expression, noticing she was shivering with cold, her thick lips a faint purple. Are you cold? Alex instinctively pushed Natasha aside, looking at her with some confusion. I remember Howard said our uniforms were designed to keep us warm. Natasha rolled her eyes, pushed Alex aside, and nimbly ran towards the train, cursing inwardly as she ran. Alex, are you really stupid or are you just pretending? Natasha, don't believe I can't take you down. Watching Natasha run away, Alex spread his telekinesis around her, teleporting her immediately. He jokingly said, we don't have to run. Finding they had reached the train's center, Natasha snorted coldly and ignored Alex as she scrambled down the train's roof. Her lithe body dangled upside down from the train, peering through the window. Zora's in there, Natasha snorted again as she turned to see Alex also hanging upside down. Alex also spotted Zora, and old and new grudges surged into his heart. He grabbed Natasha's arm and appeared directly in the train car. Seeing the panicked Zora, Alex wore a grim smile and stared at her, saying slowly, Zora, we meet again. How could you? Zora pointed at Alex, seemingly terrified, his words incoherent. Alex had no time for conversation. He lunged forward and unhesitatingly delivered a massive fist to Zora's head, knocking him to the ground. Zora's face hit the iron floor of the train, bleeding instantly, accompanied by a painful wail. While Alex was busy disciplining Zora, Natasha, like a cheetah, quickly struck down several Hydra agents in the train car. Turning to see Alex aggressively attacking Zora, Natasha rushed over to stop him. Stop it. You might as well kill him. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Alex punched Zora in the chest again. I learned that move from you. It hurts, but it doesn't kill you. Seeing Zora curled up in agony, Alex couldn't help but laugh. Now that seems like a pretty good move. Natasha raised an eyebrow, a look of pride on her face. Just then, Nick's gruff voice rang through their headsets simultaneously. Alex, we're in trouble. Alex's heart skipped a beat, and he shouted, what happened? Is Steve okay? In the movie, Bucky had the accident on this train, But now Bucky had sunk into the vast ocean. Could Steve become a relic of history? Their firepower is too strong. Nick's words were barely finished when a scream echoed through the headset. And the headset was silent. Seeing Alex's fury, Natasha gently patted his shoulder and pointed to a nearby screen showing a chaotic fight in a train car. "There's a camera here." Alex glanced back, then vanished from his spot, reappearing in the train car where the fighting was taking place. Seeing Alex's appearance, Logan couldn't help but smile. "Alex, if you don't come, we're in trouble." Alex turned and glanced around. They were now huddled in a corner between train cars. Steve held his shield, his hands trembling slightly as he gripped it. Nick leaned against the train wall, one hand clutching his waist, blood streaming from his fingers. Logan wasn't injured, but his uniform was tattered. What the hell is going on? Alex couldn't understand. With the strength of Steve and the other two, how could they have been forced into such a predicament? Logan shrugged and pointed to the opposite side of the carriage, where a gaping hole let in a howling wind. He said helplessly, "We didn't expect Baron Strucker to still be alive. We were caught off guard and nearly got blown off the train." After a brief pause, Logan continued, "That cannon was incredibly powerful. Even Steve couldn't withstand it and had to dodge. Oh, and there was also a swordsman who was also very powerful." After a brief pause, Logan pointed at Nick. "He's the one who injured Nick, Strucker." Alex was also startled by the words. If he had come across them, he'd probably have been startled too. Alex cautiously poked his head out to see what was happening outside when an energy bomb the size of a human head roared in and landed on the door between the carriages, blowing it away. "Run!" Before Alex could react, Steve grabbed him, and Logan grabbed Nick. They sprinted around the corner, heading for the rear carriage, ducking around another corner. As the four of them stopped, the corner they'd been hiding in was blasted to smithereens, sending a torrent of snow and wind pouring into the carriage. "Damn, that's so intense." Alex glanced at the gaping hole with lingering fear, then looked at Nick, who was slightly weakened, and said in a deep voice, "We can't hide any longer. Steve, hold it up for a bit, I'll take him." Steve nodded and rushed out, shield raised. Alex followed closely behind, looking up and teleporting to the figure carrying the heavy artillery. Even with a warning, the side of Strucker alive again trembled with fear, and the dagger in his hand shifted, piercing Strucker's shoulder. To Alex's surprise, the dagger in his hand slipped, sending a trail of sparks flying, without injuring Stark at all. Invulnerable, Alex was stunned. At that moment, a sword suddenly appeared behind Alex, and Alex didn't react at all. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 42 Train Battle, Part 2. The sharp sword plunged fiercely into Alex's back, piercing through his body and exiting through his chest. Blood flowed down the gleaming, cold sword, a blinding red. Everyone was stunned. Steve and the others were stunned. Natasha, watching the battle from the front of the train through the camera, was stunned. Even Baron Strucker was slightly stunned, then burst into laughter. The sword's owner was also excited. Unable to speak, he only expressed his inner ecstasy with his trembling body. "You think you can kill me like this, Baron Zemo?" Seeing the mask on the man's head, Alex immediately recognized him as the Baron Zemo he had thrown into the superglue. "Since superglue can't kill you, then die again," Alex snorted coldly, and quickly turned the dagger in his hand. While Baron Zemo was still unconscious, he plunged it into his eye socket. Quick, accurate and ruthless. Baron Zemo was clearly not expecting this and was caught off guard. But he was ruthless enough to not react at all. Suddenly, the sword in his hand twisted, and Alex howled in agony. Though Logan's extraordinary healing abilities hadn't bothered Alex, the pain was unbearable. "I bought a watch last year," with a curse, Alex, in a fierce act, thrust his dagger forward. The blade sank deep into Zemo's throat, and only muffled groans escaped. Alex and Zemo engaged in a fierce battle, while Steve and the others rushed forward in panic. Baron Strucker, upon seeing this, raised his heavy artillery, leaped over the entangled Alex and Zemo, and attempted to fire. Alex, upon seeing this, turned his body to the side, swung his dagger, and forced Zemo's body into a bend, colliding with the muzzle of the heavy artillery. The muzzle deflected the energy projectile, which struck the nearby train wall, creating another large hole. A strong gust of wind rushed in, causing the three people's bodies to sway slightly. Seeing that Steve and the others were about to rush over, Strucker decisively threw away the heavy artillery in his hand, kicked his feet and took a few steps back, avoiding Alex and Zemo, and then jumped high again and killed Steve and the others like an eagle swooping down. Looking at Strucker flying down, Steve's eyes narrowed, and he raised his shield slightly to block it above his head. With a muffled groan, Steve couldn't help but take a few steps back, and his arms were slightly numb, which showed how strong Strucker's strength was just now. Logan roared, clenched his fists, and slowly stretched out a pair of bone claws, looking at Strucker opposite with a vigilant face. Strucker patted his shoulder nonchalantly, squinting at Logan with a sidelong glance. With a cold sneer, he slowly said, "Actually, I have to thank you all. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have the power I have now, Pa." Logan spat, raised his head slightly, and said calmly, "Let me see which is thicker, your skin or my claws." As soon as he finished speaking, Logan charged forward with the ferocity of a wolf. Logan's bone claws were indeed powerful, even as powerful as swords, but Strucker was now invulnerable. Even Alex's dagger couldn't hurt him, let alone Logan's bone claws. So, Strucker didn't care at all. As Strucker expected, Logan's bone claws never left a mark on him, let alone hurt him. Logan had no way to deal with Strucker, and Strucker had no way to deal with Logan either. Both were skilled fighters, one invulnerable, the other possessing extraordinary self-healing abilities. They exchanged blows for dozens of rounds, neither bearing a single scratch. While Logan and Strucker battled tooth and nail, Alex and Zemo were nearly victorious. However, Zemo, a mere mortal, was no match for Alex's exceptional healing abilities and super soldier physique. He held on for several minutes before finally reaching his limit. Knowing his imminent doom, a cold glint flashed in Zemo's other good eye. Uncanny strength found its way. He released his sword, grasped Alex's arm with both hands, and with a powerful thrust, he leaped from the broken hole, carrying Alex. The cliffs below loomed. The two were now entangled, and a teleportation would carry them both. Alex had no problem taking Zemo back with him to the train. However, Zemo resisted the teleportation, leaving Alex frustrated. "God damn it, don't hold me back if you want to die," Alex couldn't help but curse, struggling hard to break free from Zemo. Unfortunately, the dying Zemo was so strong that Alex couldn't break free. On the train, Steve became nervous after not seeing Alex come back for a long time. He quickly left Logan and Strucker, who were still fighting each other, and ran to the window. He saw Alex and Zemo falling rapidly, and his face changed drastically. On the other side, at the front of the train, Natasha couldn't help but feel terrified. She couldn't see Alex's situation and could only guess from Steve's expression. Seeing Steve's expression, Natasha's face also changed drastically. She was about to rush out to save them, but suddenly found that Zola had climbed up from the ground at some point, holding a controller-like device in her hand. "What do you want to do?" Zora wiped the blood from his face, smiled faintly, and said, "Do you know why this train is called the Death Train?" Before Natasha could speak, Zora laughed again. "This train is loaded with explosives. If I press the switch, boom, the entire train will instantly shatter into pieces, and everyone will die. You won't get yourself killed," Natasha said, stealthily reaching for her wristband. "Tell me, what do you want?" Zora shook her head and chuckled. "I won't die, but you all will. I've had enough of you." At that moment, Alex suddenly appeared. A flash of black lightning streaked across, slicing Zora's wrist, and the controller fell to the ground. A bolt of lightning immediately shot out from Natasha's wristband, pinning Zora to the ground, unable to move. "Keep an eye on him. I'm going to deal with the other guy." Alex appeared briefly and then disappeared, returning to the previous carriage. Looking at the two bloody arms hanging on Alex's shoulders, Steve was slightly stunned. "Alex, you?" Alex smiled bitterly and shouted to Logan, "Logan, get out of the way, I'll deal with him." Logan did not hesitate at all and immediately stepped aside. He trusted Alex unconditionally. Stark took a look at the strange-looking Alex, his heart skipped a beat, and he felt a little scared. Alex chuckled, rushed forward, grabbed Stark, and then disappeared in an instant. Outside the train, thousands of meters high, Alex looked at Stark with a smile. "Don't you like to play? I'll play with you." As he spoke, the two fell rapidly. Looking at the smile on Alex's face, Stark clearly felt that this was the smile of the devil. Chapter 43 Allegiance. After half an hour, Strucker couldn't help but beg for mercy. Falling from the sky over and over again, never emerging until the very last moment, was too much of a challenge. Beg for mercy, Alex snorted, annoyed. I haven't had enough fun yet. Alex lifted Strucker up to the sky once more, then dropped him without hesitation, vanishing. Strucker wanted to cry. One of his arms had already been broken from playing. During a previous fall, he'd used his hand to support himself upon landing, and his entire arm had shattered. Besides his arm being completely broken, both legs were also broken, and his neck had been severely damaged. If this continued, Strucker doubted he'd survive. With the ground right before him, Strucker was terrified. He had no idea when the demon would appear. Would he be brought back to the sky before it hit the ground? Or would he wait until some part of his body made contact with the ground before reappearing? Expectations and fears lingered in Stark's heart, wearing away his will bit by bit. Sometimes, Stark even thought that it would be better to just hit his head against the ground and die. Death is not actually scary. What is scary is the endless torture of fear, which can drive people crazy. Unfortunately, Alex showed up at the last moment. When Starks had crushed a small piece of snow, Stark could even feel the hard stone surface touching his head. Demon, what do you want? Stark looked at Alex in front of him with indifference, without any sense of relief for escaping death. He said weakly, whatever you want, I can give you, all the information about Hydra, personnel information, research information, everything. After Bucky's accident, Alex was determined to eradicate Hydra. It was obviously not enough to just kill a few leaders. Stark was a smart man and he quickly figured out what Alex wanted to do. He sneered and even shouted a slogan, cut off a head, and 2 more will grow. Long live Hydra, Alex sneered, carried Stark back to the sky again, and said calmly, then chop off those 2 heads too. Seeing that Alex was about to throw him down again, Stark chose to surrender, and said slowly in a tone full of lust, instead of working hard to destroy Hydra, why not control it and become its master? Would that be better? Alex looked at Stark with a corner of his eyes. You want me to help you deal with the Red Skull? Alex still remembered a sentence Natasha once mentioned. Hydra used to belong to Stark, but unfortunately it was later seized by the Red Skull. Upon hearing this, Strucker didn't hesitate at all and began to express his loyalty. As long as you help me kill the Red Skull, I will serve you all my life, and Hydra will be at your disposal at any time. I asked you to kill Hitler, will you do it? Strucker paused slightly, then spit out a word with a firm face, kill, then I won't believe you either. Alex chuckled and let go of his hands. Strucker fell rapidly, and his cursing could be heard from a distance. On the train, Steve waited for an eternity for Alex to return. All he could see were black dots falling from the sky. Finally, unable to resist, he called Alex. Alex, mission over, we should go back. Okay, I'll be right back. Alex suddenly appeared beside the rapidly falling Strucker and whispered, remember your words, Strucker, of course, didn't hesitate, nodding in response, I swear to serve you until death, my master, remember this. Or you'll die a miserable death. Alex snorted, picked up Strucker, and returned him to the ground. Let's go. I'll contact you if anything happens. Strucker hesitated for a moment, then, enduring the pain of his broken leg, trotted off. Watching Strucker disappear into the snow, Alex fell into deep thought. In truth, Alex had already been tempted by Strucker's words. As Strucker had said, rather than destroying Hydra, it was better to control it, make it his own force, and work for him. After all, the Marvel Universe isn't a safe place. Having a powerful force as a backing is much safer. Furthermore, with a mind mark, Alex could find Strucker at any time, without having to worry about him escaping his control. Mind marking involves marking a person or object with one's mind, allowing Alex to teleport to that person or object at any time. This is an ability Alex didn't have in his previous life, and Alex suspects it was granted when the Tesseract enhanced his teleportation abilities. Back on the train, seeing everyone was there, Alex didn't say a word, just picked everyone up and headed straight back to camp. Watching Carter and Zola leave the camp, Steve couldn't resist his curiosity and turned to Alex. Alex, where's Strucker? Alex shrugged, his expression nonchalant. Dead, just like Zemo, smashed to pieces, dead as hell. Steve opened his mouth slightly, hesitated, and said, dead, so be it. He was already dead anyway. Under Alex's influence, Steve changed significantly, no longer being so pedantic about being a good person. I think we should take a break. We've got a tough battle coming up." Seeing no one seemed inclined to leave, Alex stood up and spoke with a serious expression. If his predictions were correct, Zora would confess Red Skull's plan for a global bombing. To stop Red Skull's frenzied actions, the Howling Commandos would undoubtedly spearhead the attack. Furthermore, during this operation, Steve would fall into the Arctic ice, something Alex was determined to prevent at all costs. Everyone exchanged a non-committal glance, then turned and left. Alex vanished in an instant. They assumed he had returned to his room, but in reality, Alex had gone to find Strucker. At that moment, Strucker was leaning against a leeward rock, sheltering from the increasing snowstorm. Seeing Alex suddenly appear beside him, Strucker was startled, but quickly recovered and called out respectfully, "Master." Alex had been watching Strucker, very satisfied with his performance. He nodded and said, "I said I would find you, no matter where you are." This was exactly the effect Alex had intended, mysterious and powerful, making Strucker dare not even think of rebelling. Strucker was truly afraid. He felt that the master before him was truly a demon that was attached to his bones. Red Skull will die in the next few days. After he dies, you have to take over Hydra as soon as possible. Ignoring the surprised Stark, Alex said to himself, after taking over Hydra, get rid of the gang immediately, hide, and don't let anyone find you. After thinking about it carefully, Alex turned to Stark and asked, does Hydra have people in China and Japan? If not, send some people over as soon as possible. I will be useful then. After dealing with Red Skull, Alex prepared to go to China. He was a descendant of China in his past and present lives, and he could not turn a blind eye to China's troubles. Stark lowered his head and responded in a deep voice, Hydra's influences spread all over the world. We have people in China and Japan, that's good. After leaving a word, Alex disappeared immediately. Returning to his room, Alex lay on the bed with his head tilted back, thinking with some pride in his heart, if we call all the Howling Commandos, and add the Hydra people, it will be a matter of minutes to wipe out the Japanese. P.S. Scorpio has never asked for anything, but today I am begging for collections and recommendations, but there are really few recommendations. Chapter 44 Alps Base. Just as Alex had predicted, not long after they lay down, Carter woke them up. Seeing Carter's anxious expression, Steve couldn't help but ask, somewhat worriedly, Carter, what happened? Don't ask anything, just follow me to headquarters. Carter responded decisively, turning and leaving without a word. Steve and the others exchanged bewildered glances. Alex, however, understood the situation. He knew that Zora had revealed Red Skull's global bombing plan, and the Allied leaders were anxious, needing them to save the world. Let's go. Alex gave Steve a push and followed him toward headquarters. Seeing this, the others also set aside their thoughts and followed the two out of camp. The Howling Commandos' camp was not far from headquarters, and they arrived in a matter of minutes. The headquarters was packed with star generals and generals. Nearly every major figure in the Allied forces had arrived, and the rows of military insignia were dazzling. Everyone's attention turned to Steve and the others as they entered. Steve hesitated slightly, looking around as he saw Carter walking quickly over. Alex and the others followed suit without hesitation. Carter, what exactly happened? Steve asked in a low voice, carefully surveying the generals present. Captain, please come over here. Carter was about to speak when a middle-aged man in a military uniform with the rank of lieutenant general pinned to his chest in the center of the crowd waved and called out. Turning to see Alex and the others beside Steve, he shouted, and your friends, come over here too. Steve glanced sideways at Alex beside him, then turned and walked past the generals to the center of the crowd, where a huge sand table was placed. The huge sand table was the European continent, with dozens of small flags on it, some belonging to the Allies, some to the Nazis. Steve, we're facing a huge crisis, the general who had greeted them said gravely. We desperately need your and your teammates' help. Steve, a passionate and patriotic man, straightened his body and replied loudly, no matter what the mission, we will do our utmost to complete it. Alex sighed silently at Steve's dignified expression. Schmidt thinks he's a god. He wants to blow up half the world, targeting all major and medium-sized Allied cities, including New York and London. The lieutenant general stopped talking. Phillips, a former colonel at the recruit training base, stood in front of the sand table and pointed at several pre-marked flags. He glanced at his watch, glanced around, and said gravely, according to our new friends, the bombing is less than 24 hours away. Phillips then produced several photos showing the massive bomb that Alex, Steve, and Bucky had seen at the Hydra base factory they had first intruded into. Mr. Howard speculates that this bomb is incredibly powerful, enough to flatten all of New York. Phillips pointed at Howard in the corner, his face heavy. So, we must stop him immediately. Where's he? Steve's expression grew serious. Phillips tossed out a few more photos, each showing a snowy mountain range. The Alps, Hydra's most secretive base, home to nearly 10,000 Hydra troops. But due to the terrain, our troops can't reach it. Steve took the photos, glanced at them, and then handed them to Alex behind him. Is that okay, Alex? Alex glanced at them casually, then nodded without saying anything. Speaking in this kind of situation wasn't appropriate for him. It would incur hostility. Seeing Steve and Alex's actions, all the generals present frowned slightly, a hint of dissatisfaction lingering. Rogers, any ideas? Phillips, impressed by Alex's performance, noticed the general's expressions, and quickly called out, pulling Steve back. Alex's affirmative response instantly bolstered Steve's confidence. Turning to the generals, he declared confidently, "Generals, we will accomplish this mission." Hearing Steve's words, the generals present applauded enthusiastically, their voices filled with excitement. Amidst the generals' constant expressions of gratitude and respect, the Howling Commandos left the headquarters. As soon as they returned to camp, Carter grabbed Steve, his face stern, and sternly demanded, "You want to die? That's Hydra's most secret base, with 10,000 Hydra troops. You think you're a god, capable of taking them all down by yourself?" Hearing Carter's relentless scolding, Alex's heart raged. In the movie, Steve at least had backup, but now, they had nothing. Just the 5 of them. He endured it silently until Carter's scolding stopped, then he said quietly, "If we don't go, who else can stop him?" Carter paused, stunned for a moment before replying, "We can't just die like this. We can't just stand by and watch Red Skull bomb, can we?" Steve opened his mouth to reply, adding, "Besides, we have Alex. He's already agreed, so it must be possible." Alex couldn't help but curse. "Damn, is that what I meant by agreeing? I just said I could take you there, not that I could accomplish this mission single-handedly." At this point, Alex could only swallow the bitter fruit. "You guys get ready first, I'll go explore the way." Without waiting for anyone to speak, Alex fled. After more than a dozen teleportations, Alex finally found a secluded spot outside Hydra's Alpine base. Hiding in his shelter, Alex carefully surveyed the base. It was unexpectedly large, with Hydra traces visible from the base to the summit. Alex strongly suspected Hydra had hollowed out a mountain to construct this vast, hidden base. Adding to Alex's difficulty, the base was heavily guarded, with massive iron gates blocking many areas. Even with teleportation, Alex couldn't sneak in. After a moment's deliberation, Alex suddenly remembered a scene from the movie, Steve breaking into the base alone and being brought before the Red Skull. Just as the Red Skull was about to shoot Steve, the supporting characters from the movie rushed in through a window. Alex's eyes suddenly lit up. With a window, Alex could sneak into the base. After a long search, Alex finally found the window on the edge of a cliff. Through the window, he saw a spacious room. The Red Skull stood engrossed in front of a painting, seemingly admiring it. Surrounding Red Skull were several Hydra soldiers, each armed with a large energy gun. Just looking at the muzzle revealed its considerable power. "Let's charge in from here." Alex's teleportation vanished as he took another closer look at the window. Chapter 45, The Downfall of the Red Skull. Alex had originally planned to charge in and destroy the plane and its missiles. But seeing the figure in the window, Alex realized he couldn't do it alone and had to give up. Teleporting back to the camp, the Howling Commandos were fully armed and ready. Seeing Alex, Steve hurried over and asked, "Alex, how's the situation?" "We found the way," Alex said, putting on the uniform and weapons Carter handed him. Then he turned to the others and warned, "Once you're inside, immediately enter combat mode. Don't let your guard down." Everyone, accustomed to teleporting and immediately entering combat mode after teleporting, nodded in relief. "Okay, let's go," Alex shouted softly, his telekinesis spreading to envelop everyone, and he teleported away from the camp. He reappeared as a group of 6 people inside the Hydra base, in a large room with a single window. The sudden appearance of 6 people startled the Hydra soldiers, but only Red Skull reacted immediately. To their surprise, Red Skull didn't engage, but instead turned and fled. Red Skull's reaction also surprised Alex and the others. Facing the swarming Hydra soldiers, Steve swung his shield, knocking one down. He turned to Alex and said, "Go after him, leave this to us." Alex had originally considered following Steve, just in case anything happened to him. He hesitated when he heard Steve's words. But then he realized that if he chased Red Skull, Steve wouldn't be in any danger. Thinking it through, Alex no longer hesitated, immediately activating teleportation, quickly chasing in the direction Red Skull had left. However, the passageways within the base were full of twists and turns, with many sharp curves, severely limiting the effectiveness of teleportation. Hydra soldiers would occasionally sprint out, and after a while, Alex lost track of Red Skull. Cursing under his breath, Alex gave up searching inside the base, choosing to wait outside. While searching for a window, Alex discovered a runway built into the cliff face. Undoubtedly, this runway was intended for the massive Batwing. Having lost track of the Red Skull, Alex decisively chose to wait for him there. However, before doing so, Alex needed to get Steve and the others back so he could handle the rest of the battle alone. But when Alex returned to the room they had entered, Steve and the others were gone. "Fuck," Alex cursed, temporarily abandoning his plan and returning to the runway. As Alex returned, the sealed door at the end of the runway opened, revealing a massive Batwing. Teleporting, Alex appeared directly at the front of the plane, where a transparent area revealed Red Skull in the driver's seat. Alex planned to dispatch Red Skull first, then destroy the missiles at the tail of the plane. However, Alex failed to notice as a speeding car, carrying 4 people, Steve and the other 4, rushed out of the door, right behind the plane. Shortly after Alex had chased him out, they had also dealt with the Hydra soldiers in the room and followed him out. Alex lost his way, but Steve and the other 3, aided by Logan, followed Red Skull scent all the way to the helipad. Seeing Alex suddenly appear before his eyes, Red Skull was visibly startled and quickly jumped out of the driver's seat, grabbing an energy gun from the side and taking precautions. Alex instantly appeared behind Red Skull, slashing his dagger through his arm with a swift movement. He then kicked up a leg, aiming for Red Skull's wrist. Though only injected with an incomplete super serum, Red Skull's agility and skill were no less impressive than Alex's. He raised his hand to hold Alex's wrist and twisted it. The pain forced Alex to release his grip, and the dagger fell to the ground. Red Skull knocked Alex's dagger away, and Alex, not disappointed, kicked the gun out of Red Skull's hand. In the first round, neither player had the upper hand. Fearing the missiles looming from the tail of the plane, Alex didn't hesitate to pull the entangled Red Skull off the plane. After the previous train battle, Alex had discovered the usefulness of this tactic, and he didn't hesitate to use it again against Red Skull. Red Skull was initially unprepared, and only realized something was wrong once Alex had gotten him off the plane. He held on to Alex's hand tightly, his fingers practically digging into his flesh. Alex, however, was prepared. He had sought out Strucker again and obtained some death spores, waiting for just this moment. The death spore virus can cause weakness, excruciating pain, and even death in its victims, but it clearly can't kill Red Skull. The death spore virus is ineffective against metahumans, and Red Skull, having only been injected with an unfinished super soldier serum, isn't yet a true metahuman. Therefore, the death spore virus will have some effect on him. Alex didn't expect the death spores to kill Red Skull, but only hoped they would temporarily weaken him. That way, Alex could easily break free from Red Skull's grasp and let himself fall to his death. Watching Red Skull's rapidly falling body, Alex chuckled softly and quickly returned to the plane. Just as he was about to head to the tail, his eyes suddenly fell on the machine in the center of the plane. A brilliant blue light emanated from the center of the machine. Inside was the Tesseract. I'd better keep such an important item, Alex thought for a moment, reached out, took the Tesseract, and placed it in a nearby box. He returned to his Brooklyn apartment and hid it there. Then he returned to the plane and ran towards the tail. Halfway there, Alex heard several familiar voices. "Steve? Why are you here?" Alex was surprised to see Steve and the others emerge. Steve smiled at Alex and pointed behind him, saying, "We've already taken care of them." "Where's Red Skull? He should be dead from the fall." Alex wasn't sure if Red Skull was dead or not. He was too rushed to check. Nick strode past Alex and scurried over to the cockpit. He stared at the rows of buttons before him, then turned to Alex and asked expectantly, "Can this thing still be operated?" Alex shook his head and said, "Probably not. The plane's power came from the Tesseract. Now that the Tesseract had been removed, it would be a wonder the plane could still fly." So what do we do now? Wait for it to crash naturally, Nick glanced around and said with a look of regret. I'll take you back first. The threat of the natural crash was significant, and Alex needed to sink it into the ocean, just like in the movies. Then, I'll take it back. Chapter 46. It's time to go to China. Why not return? We can still bomb the Hydra base. Natasha stepped forward, looked at the plane's display, and gestured with her fingers. At the plane's speed and altitude, it should be able to glide back to the Hydra base. Alex shook his head repeatedly. Of course not. There are many missiles in the plane. Their explosion is enough to destroy the entire European continent. Many people will die this time. With Red Skull dead, Hydra will be his. How could Alex do such a foolish thing? Steve slung his shield behind his back, nodded, and said happily, Alex, it's so kind of you to think that way. Steve always had a kind heart, and he hoped his brother would be like him. Alex smiled subtly and nodded, saying, time is running out. We should go back. As soon as he finished speaking, Alex spread his telekinesis to wrap around everyone and instantly returned to the base. After dropping everyone off, Alex teleported back to the Batwing. Glancing at the direction, Alex glided the unpowered plane north. A moment later, the Batwing crashed into the thick Arctic ice, then gradually fell silent, disappearing beneath the glacier. As the plane crashed, Alex teleported away, reappearing not at the Howling Commandos camp but beside Strucker. After a day of recuperation, Strucker's injuries had fully recovered, and he was resting in a Hydra base, his expression regal. However, upon seeing Alex's sudden appearance, Strucker's expression suddenly changed. After dismissing the Hydra soldiers around him, Strucker respectfully called out, Master, Red Skull is dead, take over Hydra immediately, Alex said slowly, expressionless, looking at Strucker. Strucker's face darkened at the words. He was well aware of Red Skull's power, otherwise, he wouldn't have been overthrown by him in the first place. He hadn't expected that Red Skull, whom Alex had just announced yesterday, would actually be dead today, which instilled in Strucker even greater awe in him. After completely controlling Hydra, immediately go into hiding, Alex glanced at Strucker coldly and said threateningly, without my order, Hydra must not appear again. I will obey the Master's orders. Strucker did not dare to object at all and responded loudly. Alex said nothing more and disappeared in the blink of an eye, returning to the camp in an instant. In the camp, Steve and others were anxiously waiting. Seeing Alex return safely, the last bit of worry in everyone's heart disappeared without a trace. Carter, mission accomplished, Alex gestured to everyone, then turned to look at Carter who was smiling beside him. Tell them the good news, Schmidt is dead, the world will not be destroyed, they can rest assured. Carter smiled charmingly, turned around and strode out of the camp. Guys, what do you think the command will reward us this time? Will there be a Victoria Cross? Nick pinched his chin with his right hand, looked at Alex with envy and said, I've envied Alex for a long time. Alex's tongue numbed when he heard this, his face turned bitter, and he said in a very tangled way, I hate British food. The impression British food left on him was really terrible. Alex, at this moment, Vivian Lee walked in from outside. She happened to hear what Alex said and said angrily, although British food is not as delicious as Chinese food, it's not as bad as you say. Okay, just pretend I didn't say anything. Alex shrugged and secretly rolled his eyes. Natasha seemed about to say something, but she stepped forward, placing herself in front of Alex. Her beautiful face was filled with anticipation. I'd also like to know what reward command will give us. After a brief pause, Natasha proudly added, we save the world, we're soldiers. Defending our country is our duty, Steve shouted weakly, but his words resonated with no one. No one paid any attention. Logan, holding his cigar between his fingers, showed a rare hint of anticipation. I don't ask for anything else, just a great cigar. I heard Churchill has a lot of great cigars. Steve, please come with me to command, Carter returned, a faint smile on his face. Steve looked at Carter with confusion, pointing at Alex and the others and asking in surprise, just me? Aren't they going? Yes, that's an order from command, Carter said slowly, nodding. Just a mission report. Steve nodded and followed Carter out. A moment later, Steve returned, his face furious. Carter, following behind him, had the same expression. Alex rarely saw Steve like this, so he asked worriedly, what's wrong, Steve? Steve looked up at Alex, his mouth opening and closing for a moment, but no words came out. Seeing Steve's look, Alex knew that he couldn't get anything out of him, So he turned to look at Carter. Carter, the mission reward command has already issued it. Carter turned to look at Steve and whispered, the Congressional Medal of Honor. Congressional Medal of Honor. After receiving the Victoria Cross, Alex made a point of learning about the medal. The Congressional Medal of Honor is the highest level and rarest medal in the United States. All previous recipients have been influential figures in American history. This is a good thing. Why are you unhappy? Carter hesitated for a moment, looked up at Alex and the others, and said angrily, the Congressional Medal of Honor was only awarded to Steve, and the other members of the Howling Commandos only received the Cross Medal. Alex, I told them that the success of this mission depends entirely on you. The Congressional Medal of Honor should be awarded to you. Steve looked at Alex guiltily, but they always disagreed. It's just a medal. Is there any need to be so angry? Alex shrugged with an indifferent expression. What does it matter whether it exists or not? Looking at Steve with the same expression, Alex looked around at everyone present, chuckled and continued, do you know where I put that Victoria Cross? Where? After hearing Carter's words, Nick was also a little angry and felt sorry for Alex. Alex spread his hands, frowned and thought for a long time before saying, actually, I forgot where I put it. Maybe it's in a garbage dump. Steve looked at Alex and shouted, Alex, okay, Alex, it's no big deal. It's just a piece of iron. Alex patted Steve's shoulder to comfort him, and then changed the subject and said, Red Skull is dead, Hydra's demise is a foregone conclusion, and the European battlefield no longer needs me. I decided to go to Asia to help my motherland. Alex, Steve stood up suddenly and looked at Alex with a sad and angry face. Alex, don't go. I will definitely get you a Medal of Honor. Seeing Steve turn around and about to run out of the camp, Alex hurriedly reached out to hold him back, and said with a smile, Steve, my leaving really has nothing to do with this. In fact, I had this idea a long time ago. Alex comforted Steve and explained repeatedly. I am a descendant of China. When China is in trouble, I should help, but, Steve looked at Alex with suspicion. Steve, Hydra has been destroyed, and is about to fall. Alex looked up, his mind reeling from images of the anti-Japanese war he had seen in his past life. His expression grew grim. But, in my homeland, the Japanese are bullying my compatriots. They are crying and bleeding. I must go back and help them. It's my responsibility. Chapter 47, Master Zhang. After a long journey aboard an American warship to Asia and several subsequent transfers, Alex and Logan finally landed on Chinese soil, a land ravaged by devastation. Alex, what do we do now? Logan, still unlit, a half-smoked cigar dangling from his lips, casually surveyed his surroundings. Waiting for someone, Alex stood at the ferry, his heart racing as he gazed at the bustling crowds of people. To make matters worse, China in 1942 suffered not only military defeats but also a century-long drought, leaving vast expanses of land barren and devastated. People were forced to leave their homes in search of survival. On the dock, Alex saw scores of elderly people with children, each carrying iron pots slung over their shoulders. The refugees, their faces pale, desperately rushed off the ferry, heading for the city beyond the dock, believing it offered a path to survival. Unfortunately, before they could escape, groups of police in pale blue uniforms, batons in hand and rifles slung over their shoulders, closed in, attempting to drive everyone back. The frantic refugees, naturally, refused to give up, desperately charging at the police cordon. After a brief standoff, a portly officer pushed through the cordon and stepped forward, his round face etched with impatience. You troublemakers, get out of here right now, or I'll shoot. He pulled a pistol from his waistband, fired several rounds into the air, then aimed it at the refugees ahead. The refugees, mostly simple peasants, recoiled and trembled at the sound of the gunfire, taking several steps back. Alex, Logan lifted a cigar from his lips with one hand and turned to look at Alex, a hint of anger crossing his calm face. Alex gave a wry smile and shook his head, signaling Logan not to intervene. Alex wanted to help the refugees, but he lacked the ability to do so. Seeing the retreating refugees, the officer in charge looked smug. He waved his hand like he was shooing away flies and casually said, "Go back where you came from. This isn't the right place, you're killing us," one of the refugees shouted. "I'm killing you," the officer glared, shouting arrogantly, "there's no point keeping you alive. Once you're dead, everything will be fine. Death is even better, I'll take you with me, you bastard." A proud old man rushed forward, hammer in hand, ready to strike the repulsive officer. The fat, pig-like officer was so startled that he nearly dropped his gun. Fortunately, he realized his mistake in time. Looking at the gun in his hand, he steeled himself, placed the tip of the gun against the old man's forehead, and cursed, "You dare move again, old man? If you do, I'll shoot you." His posture made it seem as if he was ready to shoot before the old man could even move. Alex was really angry, and he flashed and suddenly appeared next to the police officer. He put his right hand on the pistol that was against the old man's forehead, turned to look at the police officer, and said softly, "My brother, we are all making a living, there is no need to shoot, right?" Having just returned to China, Alex did not want his hands to be stained with any Chinese blood, even if the blood was from the police officer in front of him, whom he extremely hated. The police officer didn't notice that Alex appeared suddenly, thinking that he had come out of the crowd. He squinted his eyes and cursed loudly, "Who do you think you are, kid? Get out of my way, or I'll kill you too." Alex's face was tense. And he said slowly, word by word, "There are some people you can afford to offend, and some you can't." Xuan Zhang raised his eyes to glance at Alex, and found that it was not someone he knew well. He shouted arrogantly, "There is no one in the territory of Shanchang that I, Xuan Zhang, can't offend." Xuan Zhang, Alex frowned, snorted coldly, raised his hand and slapped Xuan Zhang's fat pig face. "You can't afford to offend me." Alex didn't take the four major families of Zhang, Song, Kong and Chen into consideration at all. Even if Zhang Guangtao was standing in front of him, Alex would still hit him. In the whole of China, there are few people Alex dare not hit. Xuan Zhang was clearly stunned. He covered his face with one hand and pointed at Alex with the other. He was stunned for a moment before screaming, "Shoot! Shoot! Kill him!" The police officers behind Xuan Zhang drew their guns and pointed them at Alex. Alex glanced coldly, and the police were so frightened that they dared not move. Alex had fought in so many battles on the European battlefields and killed many people. His ruthlessness was far beyond the reach of these cowardly police officers. Logan had unknowingly walked up to Alex and looked at Xuan Zhang coldly, as if he were looking at a corpse. Xuan Zhang trembled uncontrollably at the sight of Logan, frightened not only by his gaze but also by his skin color. In this era in China, foreigners were considered superior. Provoking foreigners meant international disputes, and in international disputes, the Chinese were always the ones who suffered the most. Just as Xuan Zhang was debating whether to kneel and apologize or offer money, a middle-aged man parted the crowd, glanced around, and headed straight for Alex. Seeing this newcomer, Xuan Zhang couldn't help but feel excited. Just as he was about to offer some flattery, the middle-aged man approached Alex respectfully. "Excuse me, Mr. Zhang." Alex nodded, looked the middle-aged man up and down, and said, "Yes, I'm Zhang Xuan, returning to China." Using his English name felt a bit awkward, so Alex decided to use his Chinese name, which he had already agreed to with Stark. This middle-aged man was the head of Hydra in China, holding a high position in the nationalist government. "Please, Mr. Zhang, follow me." After confirming Zhang Xuan's identity, the middle-aged man's expression became even more humble, practically bowing to offer permission. Unrelated sentence fragment. 1691. Zhang Xuan turned his head to look at Xuan Zhang, who was already pale with fear, and asked with a chuckle, "Now, can you still afford to mess with me?" Xuan Zhang collapsed to the ground, tears streaming down his face as he grabbed Zhang Xuan's trouser legs and begged for mercy at the top of his lungs. "I didn't recognize a great man. I hope Master Zhang will be magnanimous and forgive me this time." Zhang Xuan came to China to expel the Japanese, not to get angry with a small policeman. He laughed and walked away directly. Until Zhang Xuan and his group disappeared from the dock, a young policeman helped Xuan Zhang up and asked in a low voice, "Brother Song, who is this Master Zhang? Why have I never heard of him?" Xuan Zhang stood up straight, looking at the direction Zhang Xuan left, a little confused. "I don't know where Master Zhang came from, but I know the person who came to pick him up." "Who?" "The Minister of Finance of the national government." Chapter 48, War and Smoke. In a luxuriously decorated villa in downtown Shancheng, Zhang Xuan sat calmly on the plush sofa in the living room. Beside him, the middle-aged man who had greeted him stood respectfully. "Mr. Song, you guys really know how to enjoy yourself." Zhang Xuan surveyed his surroundings, his eyes growing furious as he roared, "The land of China is in mourning, and you're hiding in this palace, enjoying yourself. You really deserve to die." Zhang Xuan pondered for a long time, unable to find the right words to describe them. Any other word seemed too weak, so he could only conclude with deserved to die. Mr. Song trembled slightly and stammered. Zhang Xuan turned to look at Mr. Song, cursed again, and then declared, "Gather everyone immediately, arm yourself with American weapons, I'm going to the battlefield." Zhang Xuan simply didn't care about the nationalist government's mess. He simply wanted to drive the Japanese invaders from China and restore peace to China. War is no joke, and it's not something that can be changed by one person, unless you're a peerless warrior capable of sweeping through countless armies. Killing the Japanese emperor and the Japanese generals was easy enough for Zhang Xuan, but it wouldn't end the war. Instead, it might just infuriate the Japanese and unleash their fury on the Chinese people. Only by annihilating the Japanese, driving them from Chinese soil, could the suffering of the Chinese people end. China had plenty of people, and Hydra had many in China. With China's industrial base, Hydra possessed countless high-tech weapons but couldn't produce them, and naturally couldn't equip its soldiers. Equipment, of course, could only be obtained from the nationalist government. The Hanyang-made rifles were too outdated. Only American equipment could stand a chance against the Japanese. Mr. Song hesitated after hearing Zhang Xuan's request. "Mr. Zhang, I'm only the Minister of Finance. I can gather the people, but the weapons, Guardian Zhang has that authority, doesn't he?" Zhang Xuan interrupted him rudely, his voice rising. "If you can't, I'll ask him myself." Startled, Mr. Song quickly explained, "Mr. Zhang, China is different from Europe and America. I'm Chinese too, and I know all about Chinese traditions." Zhang Xuan interrupted him again, slapping the coffee table in front of him, shattering it. "Tradition can't stand up to a fist. Whoever has the stronger fist is right now. Gather the people immediately, and I'll ask Guardian Zhang for the American weapons," Zhang Xuan ordered forcefully, not allowing Mr. Song to say another word. Mr. Song looked helpless, sighed, nodded, and walked out. Seeing Mr. Song leave, Logan, smoking a cigar, asked in surprise, "Alex, I didn't realize you were in China." Before Logan could finish, Zhang Xuan interrupted him with a weary wave of his hand. "I really don't want to deal with these bureaucrats. Once we get the people and equipment, let's go to the battlefield." Logan glanced at Alex and changed the subject, saying, "Shouldn't we report to Steve and the others?" "Oh, we should talk to them," Zhang Xuan nodded, remembering immediately. "I still need to trouble Howard with something." The next day, somehow Mr. Song managed to make Zhang Xuan the commander of a division of the National Revolutionary Army, commanding nearly 30,000 men, all of whom were Hydra agents. More importantly, this division was fully armed with American weapons, and, as Zhang Xuan had requested, all personnel were equipped with light and heavy machine guns. This was unprecedented, not just for the Nationalist Army, but for no other army in the world. Looking at the information Mr. Song handed over, Zhang Xuan's face lit up with joy. He exclaimed in admiration, "Mr. Song, you've done an excellent job." "Thank you, young Master Zhang, for the compliment." Mr. Song felt a pang of pain at the words. He had gone to great lengths to fulfill Zhang Xuan's request, and had put in a tremendous amount of effort. But then, considering Zhang Xuan's status, he felt it was all worth it. "Are these people reliable?" Zhang Xuan asked worriedly, looking through the detailed military information. He was deeply skeptical of the Nationalist Army's combat effectiveness, but he was even more concerned about their loyalty. After all, the task he was about to undertake was crucial and couldn't afford any negligence. "Don't worry, young Master Zhang. These people have been trained by Hydra since childhood. They're absolutely reliable." Zhang Xuan nodded, then pondered for a moment before asking, "Where are the nearest Japanese troops?" With the men and equipment assembled, Zhang Xuan was ready to take on the Japanese. Mr. Song was stunned at first, then recovered his composure and slowly said, "Jiangcheng." Zhang Xuan lowered his head and muttered Jiangcheng a few times. After a moment, he had made up his mind. They would attack Jiangcheng. Looking up at Mr. Song, he asked, "Do you have any photos of the Japanese garrison in Jiangcheng? The Military Control Commission should have them." Mr. Song replied uncertainly, unsure of what Zhang Xuan was about to do. "Go find them. Find them for me," Zhang Xuan commanded firmly. "You don't have to find them inside the garrison, you can find them outside." "Okay, I'll find them right away," Mr. Song, startled by Zhang Xuan's tone, responded. After Mr. Song left, Zhang Xuan also disappeared from the villa, returning a moment later with a box in his hands. Zhang Xuan then returned to the Howling Commandos camp and led a group back to the villa. Zhang Xuan wanted to show his strength in the first battle, So he invited Steve and the others to join him, bringing with him a number of energy guns seized from Hydra. Zhang Xuan didn't want to expose his ties to Hydra just yet, so he didn't equip his troops with energy guns. His current public identity was the commander of the National Revolutionary Army, nothing more. Shortly after Zhang Xuan returned, Mr. Song also returned, holding a stack of photos. Seeing the group of foreigners suddenly appear at the villa, Mr. Song remained calm, showing no sign of unease. Taking the photos from Mr. Song, Zhang Xuan examined them and ordered, "Take me to the army." The group left Mr. Song's villa and headed for the military headquarters outside the mountain city. The journey from the villa to the military headquarters took over 10 minutes, and Zhang Xuan took advantage of this time by repeatedly disappearing and reappearing. Once they arrived, he found what he was looking for. Zhang Xuan's army's headquarters was a separate area, separate from other armies, a specific request of Zhang Xuan. The garrison was nestled in a secluded valley, surrounded by towering mountains and accessible only by a narrow path, making it difficult for ordinary people to discover. Entering the valley, Zhang Xuan found 30,000 men already assembled, standing in a silent, orderly formation in the open space. "This is a formidable force," Steve exclaimed in sincere admiration, observing the 30,000 men. Zhang Xuan felt a certain sense of pride upon hearing this. Although these men were trained by Hydra, they were still Chinese soldiers. Steve's praise filled Zhang Xuan with a sense of honor. "I am Zhang Xuan, your commander." Zhang Xuan stood at the forefront of the army and shouted at the top of his voice. "I don't know who you are, or where you come from. You only have one identity, Chinese soldiers. A soldier's duty is to defend our homeland and fight the war. The Japanese have occupied our land and bullied our compatriots. Today is the time to avenge our kinship and national hatred." These 30,000 men were Hydra soldiers, but they were also Chinese. Zhang Xuan's words stirred hatred for the Japanese, stirring the crowd's excitement and a surge of heroic spirit. "I have only one request of you, and that is to kill with all your might." Looking at the soldiers' grim faces, Zhang Xuan's heart ignited with a raging fire, and he continued to shout loudly, "Concentrate your firepower and hit hard. Even if we have to turn Jiangcheng into a sieve, don't leave a single Japanese soldier alive. Kill! Kill! Kill!" 30,000 people responded in unison, the cry of killing shaking the sky, and the momentum was like a rainbow. P.S. On the day of the public memorial, Scorpio really wanted to write a magnificent and heroic speech to commemorate the martyrs, but his pen was not strong enough, so he cobbled together this paragraph to commemorate all the Chinese who suffered in the war of resistance against Japanese aggression, and all the soldiers who sacrificed their lives for their country. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 49: Japanese Mutants. Are they mutants? Steve's eyes narrowed at the sight of the two Japs, and he turned to look at Zhang Xuan and whispered. Zhang Xuan nodded, a meaningful smile on his face. "Yes, but they're quite low level, probably around level 2, Steve nodded in agreement, saying, "Indeed, their abilities appear average." Nick was beaten so badly, he probably underestimated them. Neither Zhang Xuan nor Steve moved to help. Instead, they stood aside, watching Nick and the two Japs fight, their conversation continuing. "Look at that short, pointed-faced one." Steve pointed at the Japs who had just blocked Nick's dagger with his arm, then turned to look at Zhang Xuan and said, "His ability is probably something like stone skin, but not invulnerable. Nick's strike just now left a mark. If Nick finds the right spot, he could still injure him. To put it bluntly, he's just thick-skinned, not much of an ability," Zhang Xuan said sarcastically, glancing at the shorter man. Nick had already noticed Zhang Xuan and Steve, and when they showed up but didn't come to help, he felt a bit resentful. He blushed as he listened to their conversation. He'd really underestimated them. A gleam flashed in Nick's single eye, a sharp gaze fixed on the shorter man in front of him. The dagger in his hand danced swiftly, like a venomous snake, ready to bite at any moment. "This tall guy has a rather unusual ability. He can actually fire thermal blades from his fingers," Steve exclaimed, astonished at the other Jap's abilities. "He's quite capable, but this little Jap's is rubbish. His close-quarters abilities are completely non-existent," Zhang Xuan remarked, equally astonished at the Jap's abilities. Yet he continued his merciless disparagement. Nick's face lit up even brighter. Zhang Xuan's words were practically directed at him. With Zhang Xuan's silent guidance, Nick's spirits rallied. His massive frame displayed remarkable agility. He swerved past the shorter soldier blocking his path and, uncanny enough, appeared before the taller one. With a deft, his dagger pierced the taller soldier's hand, which had just been raised to unleash a thermal blade. The taller soldier clutched his wrist and howled in agony, his will to fight gone. With the taller soldier's destruction, the shorter soldier became a target. His strength was all he had, aside from his rock-hard skin. But Nick's agility made the shorter soldier unable to even touch him, let alone attack. After several minutes, Nick, seizing the perfect moment, suddenly threw the dagger. This action caught everyone by surprise, especially the shorter soldier. By the time he realized what was happening, the dagger had slashed in a strange arc, piercing his own eyes. How is that possible, was the only thought in the short soldier's mind as the dagger plunged into his eye, the sharp blade instantly piercing his eyeball and lodging into his brain. Zhang Xuan couldn't help but clap his hands in praise. Nick, that last move was truly brilliant. Nick grinned and pulled the dagger from the short soldier's eye socket, bringing out a shattered eyeball and a splatter of brain matter. The tall soldier nearby fainted in shock. After wiping the dagger clean on the dead short soldier, Nick casually slipped it back into the sheath at his waist and said with disdain, "What a coward, leave this guy to me," Zhang Xuan said, looking at the tall soldier and thinking for a moment. Nick shrugged, his expression nonchalant. "Whatever you say, I'm not interested in him at all." A moment later, the gunfire within the base gradually died down. Chinese soldiers gathered in groups of 3 or 5, excitedly recounting to their comrades how many Japanese soldiers they had killed and how high-ranking Japanese officers they had taken down. Zhang Xuan didn't stop them, letting them vent their ecstasy. But after a few minutes, everyone calmed down, realizing their great achievements were nothing. Others had killed more Japanese soldiers than they had. He'd killed a Japanese major, while someone could easily hear someone take out 3 colonels. Everyone grew tired of hearing this. It really wasn't that big of a deal. Leading everyone back to the base in the valley outside the mountain city, Zhang Xuan had Mr. Song distribute the bonuses he had prepared. Expelling the Japanese was the duty of every Chinese soldier, but financial rewards were essential. As the saying goes, a generous reward begets courage. Zhang Xuan intended to use the benefits of money to build a strong and courageous army. "Follow me, Zhang Xuan." Nothing but silver dollars and devils. As Mr. Song was distributing the bonuses, Zhang Xuan once again stood before the army and shouted in a savage voice, "The more devils you kill, the more silver dollars you'll get. There's no upper limit, as long as you're brave enough to kill." After this rambling speech, Zhang Xuan arrived at the prison cell where the tall Japanese mutant was being held. While the presence of mutants didn't surprise him, the fact that the Japanese were still alive wasn't a small number. The presence of mutants in Japan didn't surprise Zhang Xuan. However, what worried him was that there were 2 mutants among the Japanese garrison in Wuhan alone. Did that mean there were still many mutants in the Japanese army? If there were a large number of mutants in the Japanese army, it would have a significant impact on Zhang Xuan's future plans. Filled with worry, Zhang Xuan had just entered the cell when Natasha emerged, swaying her slender waist and smiling sweetly. Seeing Natasha's expression, Zhang Xuan couldn't help but let a hint of joy cross his face. He looked at her expectantly and asked, "What did you find out?" Although Zhang Xuan had been studying with Natasha for some time, he tactfully handed over the interrogation to her. "Alex, your fears might come true." Natasha's first words made Zhang Xuan's heart leap. The Japanese army has a special battalion composed entirely of mutants. The leader is a man named Yashida Shiro, nicknamed Sunfire. He can generate super high temperature flames and is an extremely powerful mutant. Sunfire, Zhang Xuan frowned. He had thought saving China would be easy, but now it seemed fraught with difficulty. The Japanese weren't as easy to deal with as he had imagined. Mutants' abilities vary greatly, and their strength is closely related to their abilities. Some mutants are completely incapable of combat, while others are born with the power to annihilate the world. A single mutant battalion, at least close to 1,000 strong, would be a formidable force for Zhang Xuan and his 30,000 Hydra troops. While Zhang Xuan was brooding over the Japanese mutants, some in the mountain city had already received news of the complete annihilation of the Japanese forces in Jiangcheng. Some were jubilant, calling this a godsend opportunity for the nationalist army to launch a full-scale counterattack. Others were filled with anxiety, fear and Japanese retaliation. Among them, one was furious. What happened? Who did this? The young man angrily stood up, his sharp features etched with deep resentment. My plan was about to be completed. How could this happen at such a time, Master? We're fully investigating, the balding middle-aged man beside him replied cautiously. We'll have results soon. Find him and kill him, the young man said, turning and walking away, quickly disappearing into an ancient building. P.S. This article follows the mutant leveling scheme from the movies, levels 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, with level 5 being the strongest, similar to the Omega level in the comics. P.S. I originally wanted to address the issue of Wolverine's name in this general reply thread, but after editing, it said there were sensitive words. I searched and searched, but I couldn't find any sensitive words. So, I had to dig up a previous post from a classmate and pin it to the top. Scorpio explained it there, so take a look. Chapter 50 Ghost Army. Unlike the bustling neon lights of Shanghai, the Japanese headquarters seemed deserted. Under the dim streetlights, squads of Japanese soldiers patrolled back and forth, isolating this area from the outside world. Zhang Xuan didn't alert anyone, now was not the time to kill them. Taking advantage of the darkness, Zhang Xuan silently teleported into the headquarters and inched his way to its center, a spacious hall. The busiest area was where the Japanese could be heard shouting and screaming from afar. Hugging the wall, Zhang Xuan approached a window and cautiously peered into the hall. Hada Shunroku. Zhang Xuan immediately recognized the middle-aged man in military uniform, his target. Confirming Hada Shunroku was inside, Zhang Xuan carefully observed the hall. 17 Japanese soldiers gathered around a map, apparently discussing a battle plan. Elsewhere, 5 young secretaries were furiously scribbling, presumably taking notes. Apart from these people, the only other figures in the hall were 2 soldiers guarding the door. There were quite a few people, and with Zhang Xuan's teleportation speed, he could probably take out 8 before alerting the others. Use the bomb. Zhang Xuan tucked the dagger he had pulled out back into his waist. The teleportation vanished, only to reappear a moment later, holding a high explosive bomb. Zhang Xuan had obtained this from Strucker. He had witnessed its explosive power during his previous battle against Hydra. A single one was enough to raise the entire hall to the ground. Glancing back at the hall, Zhang Xuan quietly placed the high explosive bomb in a corner, detonated it, and instantly teleported away. A tremendous roar echoed, and the entire city of Shanghai seemed to shake. Standing outside the Japanese headquarters, Zhang Xuan observed the rising smoke and the ceaseless shouting, a smug smile crossing his face. Taking advantage of the smoke and dust, Zhang Xuan returned to the hall. By then, it had completely vanished, leaving behind a scene of ruins, with broken arms and legs scattered everywhere. Zhang Xuan soon found Hada Shunroku's body. With a soft snort, he pressed the prepared note against his chest and disappeared. The next day, news of the mysterious invasion of the Japanese headquarters hit the headlines of major newspapers, and the note Zhang Xuan had placed on Hada Shunroku's body was also revealed. Anyone who speaks of massacre again will be killed. This message spread rapidly throughout China, inspiring excitement. The Chinese were truly thrilled. With the Japanese headquarters destroyed, how could they not be excited? The Japanese were furious, believing this to be an insult to the Japanese emperor and demanding vengeance, severe retaliation. Zhang Xuan, without hesitation, attacked again, dispatching several of the most aggressive Japanese soldiers. However, this did little to intimidate the arrogant Japanese soldiers. Instead, it fueled their ferocity, and they once again thrust their bayonets at Chinese civilians. Zhang Xuan had anticipated the wrath of the Japanese and had prepared countermeasures. That night, Zhang Xuan once again assembled his troops. Since the Battle of Jiangcheng, the army had rested for over half a month, and everyone eagerly anticipated another battle. Upon hearing the call to arms, a single thought crossed everyone's mind: another day of killing the Japanese. No more nonsense, just one word: kill. Unlike last time. This time Zhang Xuan didn't waste a single word, his words succinct and to the point. Kill, kill, kill. After 3 shouts, Zhang Xuan raised his hand to silence the crowd. This time, our target is Nanjing. 30,000 soldiers were stunned at the words, and then erupted in even louder cries of killing. The Nanjing massacre is deeply engraved in the hearts of every Chinese, a scar that will never fade. To avenge this humiliation is the long-cherished wish of every Chinese soldier. That night, The city of Nanjing was shrouded in blood, as if it were a throwback to those days. In this battle, Zhang Xuan led the charge, carrying a heavy machine gun like the Grim Reaper, mowing down the enemy troops. In his killing spree, Zhang Xuan finally abandoned the machine gun and, wielding his dagger, harvested the Japanese lives one by one. Zhang Xuan relished slicing his dagger across the enemy's neck. Seeing the fear of imminent death on their faces, he felt a surge of joy, like drinking a can of ice water in the dog days of summer. After purging all Japanese from Nanjing, Zhang Xuan left a message, a phrase formed from the bodies of Japanese soldiers: kill 1 civilian, and 10 soldiers will die. With his actions complete, Zhang Xuan and his army vanished in an instant, truly leaving no trace. The Japanese had learned their lesson this time, remaining silent despite media reports, as if they had become mute. As all of China reeled in excitement over the battle, both Japan and the nationalist government intervened in the investigation, seeking to uncover the true identity of the forces responsible. The Japanese Special High Technology Bureau and the nationalist government's Military Intelligence Bureau mobilized their full forces. Unfortunately, after over a month of investigation, they found nothing. Nanjing was deep within the Japanese-occupied territory, surrounded by Japanese troops, making the presence of Chinese troops impossible. When this news spread, curious Chinese people began to spread the rumor that the Chinese soldiers killed in the battle had returned to exact revenge. The absurd rumors were widely believed, and for a time, the Nanking Ghost Army became a popular topic of conversation. A single operation wouldn't quell the Japanese invaders' arrogance, and the indiscriminate killing of civilians continued. Once again, the army was mobilized, sweeping through several Japanese bases in quick succession, hundreds of thousands of Japanese troops vanishing in the blink of an eye. After each raid, Zhang Xuan would leave a message: kill 1 civilian, and 10 soldiers will pay for it. After several such raids, while many Japanese generals were furious, ordinary Japanese soldiers no longer dared to casually kill Chinese civilians. With the same elusive presence and ghost-like presence, no matter how hard the Japanese investigated, they could find no trace of this army. The name Nanking Ghost Army was thus firmly established, and even Japan was forced to give this mysterious unit a codename, Ghost Army, in a secluded mansion in the mountain city. 2 months, and you still haven't figured it out. The lavishly dressed young man, unable to contain his rage, raised his hand and slapped the balding middle-aged man beside him in the face. What's the point of keeping you around? You might as well die. The middle-aged man trembled and knelt on the ground, his voice trembling. Master. They might really be the Nanking Ghost Army, coming back for revenge after killing the Japanese devils. Nanking Ghost Army? Just trying to be mysterious, the young man snorted coldly. I'll give you another week. If there's still no news, you can die. Meanwhile, at the new Japanese headquarters, a tall young man wearing a sun god mask entered, his exposed eyes gleaming with pride. Welcome, Mr. Yasuda Shiro, the newly appointed commander-in-chief of the China Expeditionary Force. General Okamura Yasuji greeted him with a ridiculous smile and a pair of eyes. Masked Yasuda Shiro glanced at Okamura Yasuji sideways, saying nothing. Okamura Niji didn't take it as an offense, and continued with a smile on his face. The matter of the Ghost Army. Before Okamura Niji could finish, Yasuda Shiro suddenly burst into orange-red flames and soared into the sky. He could faintly hear a voice with great confidence. Leave it to me. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.